E te whare e tūnei, tēnā koe, te marae takoto nei, tēnā koe, i ngā iwi I pai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mihi ana hou ki ngā kai kōrero o te rā, ki te kai karanga o te rā, ki ngā kaimahi o tēnei rā. E mihi ana hou ki ngā mana whenua o te rohi nei, ki te Atiawa, me ngā iwi katoa o te upoko o te ika Māui. E mihi ana ki ngā manuhiri, o ngā hau e whā, ki ngā manuhiri e rere ana koutou ki te waka o Huitopa. E ngā kai kōrero o te ata, e mihi ana hou ki a koutou. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko wai au, he tangata tiriti a hou, no Ingarani, Airani, Kotiwani, Hiamani hoki, oku tupuna. I whānau au ki te whanganui atara, I tipu aki au ki Wairarapa, ki te tonga. Ko au te tahi o ngā kai rangahau o te kuninga ki Purihuroa, ko Kelly Dombrowski tōku ingoa. Ka tika te kōrero, e hara taku tō I te tō takatahi, engari he tō takatini. Tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everyone to this event. It's so exciting to finally be here, this Circular Economies, Measuring Circular Economies event. Just acknowledging those speakers and kai karanga and kaimahi doing our kai, and all of those people that have supported us to get here to this point. And I also forgot to mention our wonderful webcasting team, Mike and Andrew out the back, and then these wonderful young people here who are behind the cameras. Tēnā tātou katoa. My name's Kelly Dombrowski. I was born here in Wellington, and my ancestors came from England, Ireland, Scotland and Germany. And I grew up in Wairarapa, just over the Remutaka hill there. So it's just great to be grounded here at Pukeahu to run this event for you guys. What I'd like to do is just start off a little bit. How did we get here? Why are we here? It'll just be a couple of minutes, and then I'll introduce you to Jay, who's our keynote for this morning. You've got these programs here, and I was just feeling a bit whakamā about them because we've got these incredible designers in the room who design like fashion clothing, and I kind of sent the wrong one to the printer, and it looks like something a 5-year-old would have put together on Canva. In fact, my 5-year-old can do better. So, hey, but you don't even need your glasses for this, those of us of that in the size 16 font. But anyway, just thought I would mention that for those of you who are the wonderful artists and designers here. Circular economy. Why are we here? What is it? That's our session. What is circular economy? I'm a social scientist, I'm a geographer. Many of us in this organising committee come from the social sciences, and we talk about economy as a social a way of society organising themselves. So a circular economy is a way of organising ourselves as society that breaks with the current linear economic rationale of take, make and dispose, and instead creates a circular material flow of reduced repair, reuse and return. And for many of the industry speakers here today, you might not be using the language of circular economy, but we've invited you because you are doing work that aims to reduce extraction and waste, and that is one really important step in enacting and transitioning to circular economies in Aotearoa, New Zealand and everywhere else in the world. Some of you may know this idea of metabolic rift. Sorry for the detailed slides up there. This is an idea that, living in small communities before urbanisation, industrialisation, a lot of what we grew, a lot of what we ate was excreted and put back into the soil right where it came from. And so that nutrient cycle was very small, the circularity was a small circle, but now most of us are connected into a globalised economy and that circle is broken. Things are produced in New Zealand using our soil, using our water, exported overseas. What happens to that food that we've created, that butter that's so expensive that none of us can afford anymore? What happens to that literally at the other end? It's in Dubai, it's in China, it's in other parts of the world. So that circularity is really broken, and then we've put together all these ways of managing that. Importing fertiliser, having to think about how do we manage that nutrient cycle. The last bit here is one from Cultivate in Christchurch, which is a community garden who tried to create a circular economy that was restoring that in the centre of Ōtautahi Christchurch, where they picked up green waste from businesses in the city by e-bike, composted it on site right in the city, grew vegetables on that, and then sold those vegetables back to those same restaurants or different restaurants in the area. So they were trying to kind of make that little circle economy. But obviously, many of us work in industries where that is not possible at this point. But what is possible is what we're here today to talk about. So those of us that have been researching in the economic space and the community economy space for a long time, circular economy is not a new idea, but it's a word that's gained traction. Although our current government has downed the word for a while, globally it's still a concept that has a lot of traction. It's quite popular in engineering and design to talk about circular economy. In the social sciences, there's lots of other words that we've used historically, but we kind of get on board and go, yeah, you guys are talking about that, we also know about that. So that's where we're coming from. But our main point for our group of researchers is that circular economy is not just about technological innovation. It's not about creating new products that go into that take, make, waste system. It requires social and cultural innovation. What do we mean by that? A lot of you who've tried to do innovative sustainability things tell us that sometimes it's the connecting the dots that's the problem. If there's a new product that's compostable, who's going to compost it? Where is it going to be composted? Is there enough compost to compost all of that stuff that's being produced? And often that part of it hasn't been thought about it. That's what we mean by the social and cultural aspects of circular economy. We've got to think about how do we link those together? How do people's embodied habits have to change? How do our habits of connecting or disconnecting have to change? What kind of new ways of getting what we need have to come into being? And our speakers will speak more about that today. So just a brief run through of what we're going to cover today. Researcher talks. Why does the circular economy need measuring? That's our focus for session 1. Industry talks. Improvement barriers and possible research questions. That's our focus for session 2. And then our last session of the day is final thoughts. What next for this project of measuring circular economy? So we've built in a lot of free time today. You've already experienced the relaxed start to the day. There's lots of time for kai. There's lots of time for kōrero. Part of what we want to do is not just put information in your head, but create opportunities for networking and connection. So in that line, I'd just like our team, our organiser team, to stand up so you can identify yourselves. These are the people who are behind this event today. Georgia, Graydon, Neetha, Sita, and Derilee, and of course Dana, who you've all been in contact with. So if you need anything, that's us. We're here to help you today. Okay. Going to move on to Jay's talk, and I'll introduce Jay to you, and some of you may know him already. Dr. Jay Whitehead is Kati Mamoe Kaitahu. He's an economist specialising in social cost-benefit analysis, decision science and impact management. If you're on LinkedIn, you wouldn't have missed his social impact work, which is posted regularly. It's all for free. You can work out how to do a social return on investment for your organisation. And his work really focuses on revealing the hidden value of people, communities, and the environment. And he helps people translate these benefits into the language of decision makers, helps organisations attract investment, secure funding, and build strong cases for environmental and social initiatives. He's worked across government, the private sector, and universities, and now leads Matatihi, an economic research company dedicated to intergenerational wellbeing. So Jay, I'd like to invite you up. Let's give him a round of applause. You can use this if you want to walk around with the change. But
thanks for that. There's some notes just to start. Well, kia ora. E nā mana, e nā reo, e nā karangaranga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou o te rau karamu. E te hou kāinga, mo te pōwhiri, me te manakitanga, nā mihi ki nā kaikaranga, nā kai kōrero, mi nā ringawera, tēnā koutou i te whakataui a mato tēnei. He mihi mai hoa kia koutou katoa. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Hei uri aho no kaitahu me katima moe, ko ora kaparima toku runaka, ko takutai o te titi toku marae, ko J toku ingoa. E te whānau o te rau karamu, ke nui te mihi, kua rongamato i tō koto manakitanga, e he honore nui kia tua i kone. E muri i te pōwhiri, ki te kōrero mō te kaupapa o tēnei rā. Kia ora, I'm Jay. I'm an economist, but not that kind of economist, if you know what I mean. The sort of gooey social kind of economist. So yeah, I whakapapa down, way down south to Oraka, which is Colic Bay, Aparima, Riverton, Rakiora Māori, the birding communities down there. So they're my people. I live in Otatahi and Christchurch, and my family's slowly creeping its way up the east coast, but we haven't quite got to the North Island yet. So what I want to do is begin where the pōwhiri left us, which is grounded in relationships. I'm not a circular economies expert, so surprise. But I am focused on economies. I believe that economies at their best are not just systems of exchange, but systems of reciprocity, where trust and contributions like build on top of each other, and value doesn't just return, but it escalates over time. So my kōrero this morning is about how we design for that, relationships that grow value across generations, and decisions that turn connection into compounding benefits. And that's everything I wanted to say. Now here's what I'm going to say, and I never quite know what that is, so I'll just put those notes down. So this is what the talk's about. Me. Okay, I'm going to cover a bit of that because I always want to know who's talking to me and if I should pay attention. So I'll give you a bit of that. Reciprocity, this is really my big thing. Its role in underpinning great systems, reciprocity being the key there. Success, I want to give you the evidence that this isn't just a nice gooey economist idea. This has actually got tangible impacts in reality. Methods that I draw on a lot that help sort of amplify reciprocal decision making. Accountability, because accountability is important when you're bringing these sort of social ideas into a space where decisions are being made and those decisions have consequences. Then we need some measurement and accountability, and really amplification. How can we bring this sort of knowledge to the people who are best placed to use it and to create powerful impacts, which is often not journal papers, if you talk to me. And this pitch is not completely random. It's basically what my work looks like. So I thought I'd chuck it in there. I'm going to base a lot of this around this kind of, this idea of a reciprocal system. And it's got a couple more parts than a typical reciprocal system, but I'll just put it there for now, and we're going to come back to that in a few ways. So yeah, who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I talking to you? I'm going to start in 1999 when I failed high school because I was getting paid to ride downhill mountain bikes, and that seemed way more exciting, and still kind of does. My mate found an ad in a newspaper saying work in Japan, and we called the number, turned up. It was a dude sitting inside a storage unit with a roller garage door, and he had a desk in the middle, and he said, "I'll get you a job in Japan." And we said yes, and it was real, and I've still got both my kidneys. So that worked out. So I went and worked in Japan in this car factory like the size of Christchurch. It was insane, next to an indoor pig farming operation, which in summer was truly awful. And I kind of got interested in sustainability about that time and thought something feels off. And I came up with this fantastic idea. I learned about the Global Reporting Initiative, which had only been out a few years by then. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do something better. I'm going to make a computer program version of the Global Reporting Initiative when I was like 19. So I came back to New Zealand, did computer programming, studied that, found out that you can't launch a global initiative at 20 with no experience. So switched to electrical engineering, 2 years in, colorblind, really bad trait for an electrical engineer, quit that. Went to Lincoln University, thought, all right, I'll try this properly, did a Bachelor of Resource Studies, like environmental science. That actually worked. Passed that. Went and taught English in Japan because I was out of money, and that's a good way to get money. Came back, Masters of Environmental Policy, got a job at the Christchurch City Council, lasted about a year. I think what put me over the edge was a phone call saying, can you help my neighbours feeding seagulls and they keep pooping on my lawn as they cross? And I thought, I've studied 5 years for this. So I left that, went to Lincoln University, joined the Agribusiness and Economics Research Unit there and worked on this big program called the New Zealand Sustainability Dashboard, which went for about 6 years. And I was real into sustainability. This project kind of put me off sustainability because I wanted it to be more than it was, and it was all meeting minimum standards. And once again, even with millions of dollars and professors and everything, I still couldn't do what I wanted to do in about the year 2000 at the top, which was create a system that was aspirational, that actually drove improvements and meant something. And yeah, the millions of dollars still couldn't achieve that. So I thought, we'll just go switch. I'm going social. So I went into the social side, did a PhD in economics. I'd done economics all the way through, became a consultant, learnt those skills, started Matatihi. Here I am. That's me. So this is what Matatihi does. It does economic research, like a lot of government-funded public research projects. And we do a lot of consulting on social impact assessment, social return on investment, social cost-benefit analysis, basically non-market valuation. How do we put a dollar value on things that don't have a market price so that we can communicate to people whose brains only work in dollars? And that's quite a lot of people. So it's really, I think of myself as a communicator more than a scientist these days. I'm taking the knowledge from one realm, converting it into a language that other people understand and giving it to them. And then I have another company called MindState, which builds software for decision-making within iwi organizations and stuff. Just a little glimpse of who we work with, so you can see how chaotic my life is. It goes from the New Zealand Stock Exchange to medical cannabis to universities. It's all over the place. So the key theme is the method, not the sector or the industry. Yeah. Right, that's enough about me. We'll get into the actual good stuff now. So basically all my work is within the realm of the Māori economy these days. It's all informed by Te Ao Māori principles. This is one of my favourite ethics that underpins so much. I mean, this is what's underpinning the pōwhiri today, the idea of the reciprocity of the speaking. You find it in so many areas. And, if you think about reciprocity as a circle, taututu is not really like that. It's a system of reciprocity that escalates over time as one gift to another party is reciprocated at a higher scale, and it escalates and it escalates and it achieves balance as it goes, but that balance is constantly growing over time. Being economists, you can think of taututu as having almost two currencies, one being the currency of mana, one being the currency of mauri. The social currency being mana. When the exchanges between people, it's mana that's being exchanged and uplifted. When you're looking at the relationship between people and the environment, the currency being mauri, that's what is attempted to be uplifted over time. And one of my favourite examples of this playing out historically, hakari, sort of like a ritual feast. So the chief would host a feast, invite the manuhiri, the hapu from surrounding areas to come to the feast. It was a chance to, to manaki to them, to provide hospitality, to demonstrate wealth and power. But what happens is that the guests at this feast then are expected to reciprocate in the future at a different time. And what ends up happening is something like this. This is a tower to display the food, yeah? So, you get these enormous structures like growing and growing to just provide more and more hospitality to, give back in a way that's escalating over time. And I think it's just a fantastic example of how, the idea of escalating reciprocity informed by this taututu ethic can create these incredibly strong bonds between people and underpin those systems. But it's not just, historical practices. This is one of our projects we've been working on for years called Kaitiaki Intelligence Platforms, and this is a full remote sensing array for Māori farms. It's down the middle, you've got all the in-ground sensors around pH and nitrates and everything. You've got satellite arrays with machine learning algorithms. It's all very, very high tech. It's connected into international markets. Ngāi Tahu, we're building this for Ngāi Tahu at the moment. And sitting around the outside, we have the context that this is working in, the atua, the papatuanoku, ranginui, the connections between this and the cultural world, the spiritual world, how this all comes together and works towards one cause. So, it's not just a historical concept, it's a practice that can really amplify current technological systems right now. For next, I just want to play a quick game with you, and it's not a fun game because it's an economics game. But think about this scenario, okay? Okay, impact, I used this for a different conference, sorry, so it was an impact investing conference, but just run with it, it'll make sense. Impact RS has given me $100 to share between myself and another person who is interested in impact investing, i.e. you. I have no relationship with Impact RS, it's just a weird random gift for me and for you. So these are the rules. You must either accept or reject the offer I make you. If you accept, the money is paid as proposed. If you reject, neither of us gets anything. It's one shot, no negotiations, and here's my offer. This is how I'm going to split the money with you. I get $70 and I give you 30. Hands up, who would accept? It's probably about half. Yeah, which is about sort of higher than we would expect, which is interesting because that's good. You're very rational homo economicus type people. Yeah. So it's interesting. Now, in game theory and behavioral economics, essentially once the split moves beyond about 50-50, people start rejecting it. And, classical economics would say that's just idiotic. Why would you reject it? It's free money. Take it. Even if it's $1, you should still accept it. But we don't work like that, yeah. We have a punishment impulse, and we're going to say, screw you, you're not getting your $70, you're getting nothing. I played this as a experiment with about 14 leaders of really high-performing Māori farms. So that, think the Midak is the best of the best in terms of profitability, really leading the agricultural industries in New Zealand. And we gave them a very similar scenario. It was more contextualized to their situation, but basically the same rules. In the first instance, 73% said they would accept that deal. Literature would show 50% at most. 73 is just unheard of that many would accept a bad deal like that. So this is, you know, the bad deal. They get the 30, the other party gets the 70. So these leaders were accepting that bad deal. The reason they were giving for why they would accept such a terrible deal was relationships. They said, look, this is our doorway in. We might be able to establish a connection. We can build a relationship. Over time, we might come to an understanding, and this would be in our benefit. So then we gave them a second scenario. In this scenario, they say, hey, let's do 50-50. The other company comes back and says, nah, we're going to give you 40 and we're going to take 60. So a better deal for them, you know, for the Māori executives. This is a better deal, lower acceptance rate than the first one, because that initial gift was not reciprocated in any way. So it's still, you know, it's about what we'd expect an answer to be, but it just shows that it's not the number that matters. That was the intention and the relationship that went behind the number. So that sort of sits on our give side of the spectrum, that if you're initiating a relationship to build a functional system and a partnership, then that, you know, initial gift has to be acceptable in order to be reciprocated. I want to just talk about the Māori economy a bit, because this is where I think it's real interesting. It doesn't, and you know, anyone who's seen my work on LinkedIn probably knows what's coming, because I'm a bit of a, you know, I'm real into what Māori are doing in the economy. I think there's a lot to celebrate that's not getting attention. I think it shows how these business models that have been developed within the Māori economy in the last couple of decades are really escalating now, and the value is growing very fast. I also want to dispel a few myths in this about what the Māori economy is based on. I still think it's commonly understood to be a land and ocean and agricultural primary industries based economy, and it's just really not. Yeah. The biggest contribution from the Māori economy to GDP is in professional, scientific and technical services. It's a knowledge-based economy. Agriculture's quite far down, and this is the growth rates of those economies. You can see agriculture's growing nowhere near as fast as these other knowledge-based sectors. So the professional service sector grew 323% in not a very long amount of time, which is pretty impressive. It's far outstripping national averages, by the way. If you want to compare like to like, it's still impressive. If you compare Māori working in these sectors, you can see that the primary industries down the bottom pretty much flat, whereas the high value service and manufacturing sectors are really taking off. If you look at the Māori population versus the asset base in a 10-year period, that grew 13%, the population, the asset base grew 83%. Yeah? Looking at self-employed and self-employed income, you can see the thick yellow line down the bottom being Māori self-employed income, actually higher now than European and increasing pretty steeply. Yeah, so there's this real push into entrepreneurship, ownership, self-determination. The chart on the right's a bit squashed for some reason, sorry. But self-employed people increasing, Māori-owned businesses increasing. And I just did this survey a couple of weeks ago with Amutai, a social procurement system run out of Auckland Council. I don't know if it's still in the council or not, but up that way. And what we were asking is, all these business owners, I ran this little experiment within the survey to say, what would it take in terms of money to get you to give up running a business and just get a job? How much do I have to pay you to convince you to stop running a business and get a job? And you know, on the salary scale, I think it topped out at about four times what they currently earn. Say 4 times what you currently earn, would you accept that to get a job? Basically, no one would. And we couldn't our scale wasn't big enough, essentially. But then we got quotes like this saying, like, look, no reasonable figure would get me to give up my business. Like, mana motuhake, the self-determination, that autonomy is so important. Rush through a couple more. Export gains increasing quicker than the whole economy. Wahine Māori, this is from an old survey, but I think it's just so cool that top 3% entrepreneurial populations, not all good. I mean, could be good depending on how you read this, but, you know, the value of wahine Māori to the economy, 6 billion paid, 6 billion unpaid. I say not good and good because good, I mean, what an incredible amount of work that's been done. Not good, it's not being recognised. Māori PhD candidates, doubled, pretty cool, that's pretty cool. Thing to keep in mind, 2043, 1 in 3 tamariki will be Māori. This is a young and growing population, so, you know, we should be planning these systems now to account for what's coming in the future because it's going to be a pretty significant block. Just one more point on this. I mean, my favourite thing of working in the Māori economy is the time frames, yeah. Working with Onuku, where we're doing a 200-year plan. I mean, to be able to sit down and plan for 200 years around what's going to happen, what we need to think about over that time period. I mean, how do you design a system that lasts 200 years? It takes some incredible forethought and back thought too to say what was there before and what do we want to come. The other big part of my work is capturing many voices and many values in the decision-making process. And this comes in, I say, as balance. It's about balancing a portfolio of interests, balancing a portfolio of opportunities. I put this quote up because I remember dealing with the CEO of a large organization, and we had been brought in to help them with some strategic allocation of resources or some corporate wonky sounding thing like that. But it wasn't a Māori organisation, and he wasn't the one who brought us in. It was a he. I mean, it was a he. Sorry. He was, you know, just sitting there saying, look, this whole thing's stupid. We don't need a process. We don't need a system. I already know what we should do. What's the point of all this? And what's the point of you? And, you know, this is a very large, diverse organisation that celebrated its diversity. And I think this is a common problem we struggle with, and that diversity on its own, just in terms of staff count, means nothing if that diversity of opinion and culture and thought is not incorporated into the actual decision process. If it's just consultation, it's just, yeah, we'll listen and then us 5 and the board will decide. That doesn't really cut it, yeah. So we spend a lot of time, and Mindstake is built around this, of how do we actually capture diverse voices in a way that can inform decision-making directly and not just be consultation. I'll skip that one, actually. So, you know, I work in the area of MCDA, or multi-criteria decision analysis. There's lots of ways to do this, and, you know, choice modelling and best-worst methods and other things in my realm, but you don't need MCDA to do this. Rather than looking at the method, we'll look at an example because it's more fun. So this is Whangara Farms, who are up in the East Coast, Gisborne area. 3 big land blocks, quite a traditional farm in a way, you know, sheep and beef, little bit of native bush, some degraded wetlands, not a whole lot apart from commercial farming. So it's a private farm. It's not a Māori trust or anything, but it's all Māori owned. And they wanted to develop a 100-year plan, and not quite as ambitious as Onuku, only 100 years. And they wanted to know what to do with their land in the next 100 years. So they've got all this land, and they're thinking, what should we do with it? And what they wanted was to capture the preferences of the whole Whangaroa Farms community. So this involved executive leadership teams, this involved farm managers, farm workers, marae communities, whānau of marae communities, the shareholders, there was 2,000 odd of them. And so we ran this choice model with them saying, look, given this opportunity to create a land use plan over the next 100 years, what do you want to promote? What's your preferences for what you want to promote on this land over that time? And this has been all aggregated up, but you can see that if we look at it in terms of manaakitanga, initiatives that support the community, maybe it's bringing in rangatahi, bringing in young people to work on the farm, mentorship programs, things like that. Kaitiakitanga, so, let's restore the wetlands, replace some biodiversity, do pest control. Rangatiratanga, how do we exert leadership and governance over our area? How do we, get into having more of a say? Whairawa, the profit, should we be going down the path of high intensity commercial farming? Should we be looking at price premiums in export markets, making more money? What's fascinating about this is just some of the responses, but you can see they're very diverse. Each square is someone's preference against that criteria, and they range the whole way across, up and down. As a set though, almost incredibly well balanced. You look at that as a community and you say this community cares about all four of these things almost equally. So it's really useful in a couple of ways, this. One, the leaders can understand that, hey, if I'm a CEO who really cares about profit, and I think everyone cares just as much as me about profit, no, they don't. So it's it helps them to see, but we can also break this down and then compare them against each other. So we can say, okay, look, you executive and board members, here's your preference set. Here's the marae community's preference set that you're talking to this weekend when you go to present your 100-year plan. What do you think they care about? Is it the same as what you care about? So we're trying to align those two sets of preferences to help people understand each other and communicate with each other. This is a bit out of context, but I like to put this up because I quite often get asked by researchers to say, how do we work with Māori? And I find that there's this lack of understanding around the value of knowledge, and that value doesn't need to come with a title or a piece of paper with a qualification to show it has value. And I think I first saw this as sort of the locksmith dilemma. A locksmith comes to your car and pops it open in 5 seconds and charges you $300, and you think, what? No way, man. And this is that. It's you might work with Māori and get the tikanga shared with you over a 1 hour period and you think that's great. But what went into that? Could you get that any other way? No, pay for it. That's my message, pay for it. The other thing we really need to do, though, is stay accountable in the social space, because it is gooey, and the environmental space has been quite far ahead in terms of accounting for impacts, accounting for climate and biodiversity. It is much more measurable in some sense. And if we want to understand, what giving into these sectors actually returns to us, then it is a useful path to go down. There's been a big shift in New Zealand since the last national government. I mean, originally Bill English tried to move the country in this direction towards quantifying social impacts, sort of dropped off for a while, and then the last national government's really pushed it hard. The social wellbeing agencies, now the social investment agency, all the mental health community funding and stuff. You have to provide social return on investment reports. There's a real feeling in the NGO and trust sectors where I spend most of my time that if you can't monetize your achievements, then no one's going to pay attention. You're not going to get funding. There's some upsides. That's, if the policy intent is to steer money towards the best impacts, then, hey, it can work as long as that impact assessment's good. It sets a higher methodological bar. This has been a pretty rogue sector. People doing social return on investment reports are quite often people with a fine arts degree. And I love fine arts, but it's not really the qualification for economics. So it's there needs to be a little bit more rigor in the sector. And also internally, it really helps organisations identify what they're doing that has impact and then lean into that more and do more of that. It's definitely not all good though. I thought this post on LinkedIn was sort of summarised it all. It's a woman with an impressive social scheme talking to potential investors and getting the comment like, yeah, interesting, but we're looking for an ROI of 10. These numbers are meaningless, and the idea that a social initiative with a 10 is better than one with a 6 makes no sense whatsoever, right? So, there's some real downsides here. The cost and access barriers. If you're a small trust and you want to get an impact report and someone from Deloitte's is like, yeah, cool, $40,000, it makes it so hard for these trusts to exist in the current funding environment. The focus on a single number that can give you an idea of social impacts within an initiative is just wrong. The method opacity, the sector is new. The science is gooey. There isn't that real rigor in the methods yet. And this is the kind of the way I like to think of it. I like to think of dollars as a language. I am an economist, I work in dollars, but I don't think the dollars have any value in themselves. I think the great sage Bruce Lee can say that it's like a finger pointing to the moon. The value is not in the dollar, but the value is what the dollar is pointing towards. And Alan Watts, brilliant man, strange man, but brilliant. The common error is to look at the finger pointing the way and then to suck it for comfort rather than follow it. And I think that's what often happens in economics, is that we price things and then people get attached to the price and not the thing. There's another example, Mount Fife. It's in Kaikoura. It's a mountain. It means a lot to me. But there's two statements. Mount Fife provides 32 million in environmental service benefits per annum. Mount Fife is beautiful. Nobody has any problem with the second one. Quite a few people have a problem with the first one, but as far as I'm concerned, both of them don't capture what Mount Fife is. Both of them point towards some thing of importance on Mount Fife. Yeah, it's beautiful. That's not all it is. It's a lot of other things. Yes, it does provide that much in environmental service benefits, according to me anyway, who ran those numbers. But that doesn't tell you anything about Mount Fife. So it's like dollars are a language here. They never capture the full story, but you shouldn't be scared of them either in being, reductive, which they are reductive, but so is calling Mount Fife beautiful. I always want to bring in the voices, though. It's not enough to be an economist and talk in numbers. This is a Māori initiative that reviewed a few weeks ago, and just to hear that something that someone was involved in brought them back to their culture and just being Māori. That's powerful. We can't capture that in numbers. So it's always a balancing act between quantification and telling the story and the voice of the people who are part of that story. The final little set I wanted to go over was what I really care about is democratizing data and knowledge. Basically, how can we escalate impact in these sectors? How can we get better relationships, better returns from investment? For me, it's all about putting information out there in a way that everyone can understand and not just people with PhDs in economics. So I spend a bunch of time writing simple guides, chuck them up on the website, chuck them up on LinkedIn. I've got tools on the website. Like this one, I found that there's this incredible set of data that floats around in the economics world called multipliers data. And you can basically align to any funding request for information just with this data. So I bought it off a consultancy who spent 10,000 hours apparently making it. I think it paid like $25,000, and then I chucked it on my website for free. So anyone can go and access that, and that company no longer sells it, unfortunately. Oops. But it gets like 200-300 users a week, and it's like amazing, like that people can get this information. They don't need to go to an expensive consultant, and they can reply to those requests for information in a simple way. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of tools. AI is providing some pretty incredible options at the moment. You know, like this is just some work I'm doing down on the TT Islands. Basically, I can just chuck all my research, my messy data sheets into AI and say, that's the entire prompt that created this tool. There's nothing more. There was this one prompt. I get a tool. I can go and show it at the marae when I talk down there, and everyone can grasp this complicated story I'm telling them because it's just a picture now. So yeah, communication, you know, my socials, that's where I'm chucking all this stuff out there. Basically, you take a complex idea and mash it down to the absolute smallest point that still holds value. I like that. And I'm going to end it there so I don't go over time. Cool. Sweet. Thank you.
Oh, that's the wrong slide. Oh, kia ora, Jay. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to grab my notes. Yeah, I can really hear your own escalating reciprocity coming through there with buying the data and chucking it online, and that was an escalation they probably weren't expecting. Yeah, and you know, just balancing your career with measuring the environmental impacts and measuring the social impacts, and sort of holding those alongside each other. And for those of us on our Measuring Circular Economies project, what we're really interested in is how do we create some kind of tool or some kind of method for industry, government, researchers to hold those things alongside each other and in some kind of circular economy return on investment tool. So that's what we're working towards. So it's just been so nourishing to hear all of the things that you've already done in that space that, you know, help us think that through as well. So tēnā koe. It's my pleasure to introduce our respondents. And we will have some time for questions at the end, quite a lot of time. But what we'll do is we'll move on to our manuhiri, our guests from Ahitereiria, or I heard the Kai Kōrero this morning talk about it as the land of the sleeping land or the dreaming land in Te Reo Māori. I can't remember the exact phrase, but welcoming you from across the ocean. To come and speak to us. And our speakers are Stephen Healy, Associate Professor Stephen Healy, and Professor Abby Malek-Lopez, who are both living in Sydney, Australia. And the reason we invited them is they have just done such a long series of circular economy projects over many years, both together and separately. And they've explored so many aspects of circular economy with city councils, with business, with community groups, including very diverse community groups from many different cultural backgrounds with a lot of different cultural knowledge of reuse and repair and many of the other aspects of circular economy that we're interested in. So I'm just going to read a summarised version of their bios so you can remind yourself of what you signed up for on Eventbrite. So Stephen Healy is an award-winning teacher and author whose research explores processes of social transformation. His recent work on the circular economy explored how local identities, skills, and practices have shaped sustainable production. He is co-author of the new book, Solidarity Cities, Encountering Racial Capitalism, Mapping Transformation, and one of my favourite books of all time, Take Back the Economy, An Ethical Guide for Transforming Our Communities. He's Associate Professor of Geography and Urban Studies at Western Sydney University. Abby Malik-Lopez researches the role of design in supporting the transition to a more sustainable and socially just urban futures. She recently completed a project titled Investigating Innovative Waste Economies, Redrawing the Circular Economy, which explored the rich diversity of economic practices that contribute to social and technical innovation in waste. So many interesting stories Abby has to tell you about urine diversion and really like nitty-gritty of how you do waste. Yeah. She edited the book Design Repair, Place, Practice and Community, and she's a Professor of Social Design in the School of Design at the University of Technology, Sydney. So I just welcome you up. You've got 20 minutes to respond a bit to Jay, to give us a sense of your own research and what you bring into the room as circular economy experts. As Jay said, he wasn't a circular economy expert. We're keen to hear from you. And then afterwards, we'll have a time of discussion with all three speakers. Yeah, give them a round of applause. Are you okay both standing here for our cameras? Yeah.
I guess I'll have to hold my notes.
You can go first.
Okay, yeah. Thanks very much, Kelly, for the invitation, and thanks as well, Jay, for sharing all of your knowledge with us. We received the talk yesterday, so I think what we're aiming for here is sympathetic resonance more than a kind of playback of all the incredible things that you shared with us. But there are a number of points of contiguity that I just thought I would begin by mentioning. And one is thinking about tomorrow's speaker, Joan Tronto, and her emphasis on care. Late in her life, in about 2017, I remember Kelly and I reading this paper in the US where she was saying, look, the problem is homo economicus, is a sort of very diminished understanding of what value is. And what we need is a new term, which she called hominus curans, the caring person. And for me, that directly connects to that idea of escalating reciprocity. That was fascinating for me. And again, just thinking about my intellectual genealogy, it really connects with Elinor Ostrom's concept of complex adaptive system management, that the collective care of commons requires sort of continuous improvisation and revisiting that endures over time. And that, you know, she was able to document commons that have listed for hundreds and hundreds of years, far longer than any joint stock corporation that I'm aware of anyway. So for thinking about durability, it's important. And why is durability important? Because we've got massive challenges like climate change that are going to require all hands on deck and intergenerational response under uncertain conditions. So again, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay. I really appreciate the generosity of your work and its clarity and visual language, as I said to you before, and I find it really powerful and seductive from a design perspective. I think just thinking about what Stephen's just said, I think one of our challenges is that there are other things escalating in the world. There are bad, harmful things escalating in the world that are powerful. And so I have somewhat of a question, which is, how do we cost those harms? You know, in a sense, your story about the CEO did that. It's a comparison. But I think we need to be able to make visible and point to those things that are growing exponentially and causing harms, that are diminishing our capacity to care, to common, to build reciprocity, to build relationships, and kind of tearing and attenuating those social ties. So yeah, we're hitting up against our capacities as human beings somewhere, in some ways. I'd love to talk to you about AI. I feel, you know, like an AI vegan. I feel like, I feel, you know, conflicted, and I'd love to know more about how you are managing that. I had a question, I guess around the costing of harms. We don't have to respond to those questions now. I think the other thing I just wanted to really, in terms of resonance, was to think about designing in time, thinking through time. We are often thinking about succession planning, like we work with communities where there are elders, and in some senses they are situated in broken worlds, and it's very difficult to think across time in the way that you have so beautifully demonstrated. Really would love to learn more about that. Just one final thing in terms of bringing care together with materials. Circular economy is so much about materials, the material physical, biophysical world. And a long time ago, at the early days of what used to be called eco-design, at the birth of these kinds of industrial ecology, circular kinds of ideas, the Wuppertal Institute in Germany had this device. I'm not an economist, so I may get this very wrong, but it was called material input per unit of service. And why I found that so interesting was you can serve that measure through fast fashion, consumption, lots of products. So each unit of service, it can be a single-use thing that comes in plastic and you throw it away. But the material input per unit of service, if you expand the service, the sharing of things, the care and longevity of things, so that use life of material things is expanded, then the material impact per unit of service can be vastly diminished, because you expand the consecutive and concurrent users. I don't like that language, but you know what I mean, the social side. I think that might be a measure that we could think about using, in a sense, to value caring for products and materials in time, because one of those escalating things is single-use plastics, and that's causing so much harm to all of us and country as well. Thank you. So
We've got a script.
yeah, for our talk.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay. I won't explain that image. That came from Stephen. You can ask questions later. I'm from School of Design, but I'm often very critical of design. So it's one of those strange situations, and this is a little critical. But so this is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation version of the circular economy. You may be familiar with it, the so-called butterfly diagram, which is in wide circulation in Australia. It's based on, and when you look at it, it's actually quite confusing, especially a long way away, but it's essentially a splayed diagram of kind of technical and biological nutrients cycling in perpetual motion, and creating zero waste situation, very minimal leakage down the bottom. And it comes from design thinking. It comes from Michael Braungart and William McDonough's book Cradle to Cradle, which really emphasised this idea of waste equals food. Waste is bad. Waste doesn't happen in nature, and so we need to replicate this kind of beauty and abundance and perpetual value of circulation of value that is in nature. Now, we find this model problematic in both what it says rhetorically as an image, but also in what it does. What it says every time it's reproduced is that circularity is perfectly circular, involves singular, coherent flows of value, all lines are equivalent, free from hindrance and contamination, and results only in minimal leakage. The mess of the current world is simply erased. What it does, that model, is to promote a vision of circularity that is both replete and at scale. This vision informs, in a very direct manner, policy and expectation, but it is not grounded in the reality of the effort of actually making circular economies, which are typically nascent, socially led, small scale, and far from clean. And certainly do not fit with that sort of idealised vision of the circular economy. Hence the crucial stage of experimentation, of learning, and all the time that process takes is both devalued and overlooked. There is an assumed objectivity here, which is what Donna Haraway calls a God trick, in which we, the perceiver of the model, are everywhere and nowhere, benevolently omnipresent. Where we stand, our position is entirely absent. What's dangerous about the model, and this is a model, a representation, not a framework to think with like many of Jay's frameworks or other frameworks coming from the community economies. These are tools to think with. They're not models that we have to kind of, in a sense, aspire to or reach. What's dangerous is that it speaks first and speaks with both authority and a capitalocentric logic that erases economies, and I'm quoting Kelly here, as spaces of heterogeneity and difference. It is received as though it is something that can be achieved, or in fact has already happened, a fait accompli. And it's like we've come into the middle of a story and are locked out of contributing. The circular economy as a singular model fails to acknowledge and account for what we know is central to economic change, and that is social and, what Kelly said before, cultural innovation. This is not because novel ideas are not important in the development of circularity, but because the circular subjectivities, and I circle them here, of the consumer and the user are cogs in the circular machine. They really dominate and foreclose on other subject positions, the social innovator, the social learner, the carer, as Stephen said before. There's no room for a collective of more than one. I'm quoting Gibson Graham there, a we, an I thou, quoting Martin Buber, or an us two, quoting Tyson Yunkaporta. And yet, there are many versions of circularity other than the butterfly diagram.
Okay. So working with others across a range of projects, we find the Diverse Economies framework is a powerful entry point for surfacing the we, the I and thou, the us too, that do the work of circularity. For the past 2 decades, the Diverse Economies iceberg has worked to reframe economy as a space of heterogeneity, replete with different kinds of organizations, forms of exchange, practices of labor, ways of caring for commons and ourselves, and means of investing in a shared future. Appropriate for this talk, Clyde Binder replaces the iceberg with the Diverse Economies compost heap and its fermentations. In both our research and teaching, these figures do important work, not pointing to something new, but rather locating us inside the story, one whose end we don't already know, and it's exciting for precisely that reason. So we're now going to talk about 2 projects that challenge the dominant framing of circularity, the EMF version, putting collective social innovators, experimenters, and learners at the center of efforts to respond to the challenge of organic and electronic waste in our 2 examples. In each case, we found people working within organizations and across networks, elbows deep in the material, revaluing what is seemingly wasted, repairing, reusing, and even reinventing what's been cast off. So in this project, Investigating Innovative Waste Economies, we both worked on that project, we collaborated with Michelle Zybots, who is a transport planner and farmer, 3 coffee roasters, a multinational parent corporation, a social enterprise, and local councils to develop an innovative response to the challenge of organic waste. Oh, sorry. That's actually Michelle's sister, shoveling compost. So we explored reverse design logistics, the circular process of moving organic waste from urban sites and spaces back onto farms where they can serve as a rich conditioner for improving depleted soils and maintaining their fertility. Organic waste was a key focus for several reasons. The City of Sydney is looking to achieve 70% waste diversion from local landfill by 2030. That's 4 years from now. Organic matter is half of that waste stream, and if left to rot in landfill, organics cause significant greenhouse gas emissions. Organic waste can be a major problem for urban waste management sites as it's smelly, it gets moldy, and it's often contaminated by other materials, such as plastics from fruit stickers to serving utensils, and it can also be hazardous to handle. The forward supply chain that moves food from farm to fork is in working order. There is a significant challenge in logistical challenges in collecting and moving organic waste from city to farms that need working out, and the devil is in the details. For these reasons, we focused on spent coffee grounds as a relatively clean and abundant waste stream, potentially separated at the source by baristas everywhere. There are huge benefits for getting this right. Composting this material mitigates climate risks, supports waste diversion targets, while also improving soil productivity and water retention, and it contributes to farmland viability, and worms love it. Okay, so Michelle operates out of Hartley Vale, which is 130 kilometers west of Sydney's CBD, growing organic garlic for Sydney's wholesale market. With help from her family, oh, sorry, this is you. All right.
No, keep going.
We're trying to share the load here. Michelle has spent the past several years hauling organic waste, principally spent coffee grounds, but also dehydrated food waste from UTS campus to her 12-acre farm and composting it in windrows on her land, attracting the attention of other farmers. Michelle drew for us a version of a circular economy in her region, identifying people with whom she currently has relationships and those she wanted to draw into the conversation. You can take over now. Sorry, mate.
Oh, it's fine. Okay. So in December 2022, we held a collaborative design workshop in the design lab at the University of Technology, Sydney, to invent the circular supply chain with representatives drawn from Michelle's current and future social network. So we took her diagram and we invited people that she both already had relationships with and people she wanted to meet and draw in. We've actually found the workshop to be a powerful format for collaborative design work, opening a time-bound discursive space of rich interdisciplinary encounter and sharing. Importantly, the workshop privileges the agency and creative capacity of people to problematise the systems they're already caught up in and to collaborate in designing preferred futures, drawing upon their expertise, what they already know and what they already do. As one participant remarked, getting the entire supply chain in the room to do this inventive work had never in their experience been done before. In our workshop-based approach, we use visualisation as a tool to support participation and elicit creative contributions. Before the workshop, we developed a presentation to sensitise participants to the challenge and asked them to bring an object, image or a material that represents circularity to them to the workshop. I mean, that was effective for a lot of reasons, not least that a lot of the stuff was kind of smelly and visceral, and it was like the circular economy is this, not that thing that Ellen MacArthur says it is. So for the introductory exercise, participants sat in a circle with a centrepiece canvas, hand-drawn, because it's far more inviting of participation than beautifully developed canvases that people don't want to touch because they're too pretty. So we tend to rip paper and draw on them by hand. People took turns introducing themselves and the material they'd brought and placed them in the centre of the circle. This process provoked immediate connections. For example, one of the coffee roasters had brought in a waste material, a byproduct of the coffee roasting process called chaff, and this was a new material for many of us in the circle. They said they were looking to reuse this substance, which was currently going to landfill, and 3 hands shot up and said, oh gosh, I'll take it to use on my farm. So it was that kind of economisation that was sort of happening in the room. For the second activity, participants gathered around a 4-metre map of the circular supply chain placed on the floor of the design lab, which kind of made it coherent. We were all working on the same thing, we're all in this together. The map represented the reverse logistics of getting spent coffee grounds back onto the land from waste production, sorting and separation, hauling, composting and farming. This process elicited conversations and problem solving up and down the chain just by talking to people and getting a sense of a shared language all together as a kind of source of a sort of different way of doing things. After the workshop, we synthesised the data into a report and translated participants' ideas into diagrams such as this to facilitate further discussion. The workshop helped to identify several important issues which weren't necessarily planned. New material values, so it identified the value of certain waste materials like chaff, which had great value at the farm end as a bulking agent in compost. It identified several key practical matters and questions such as how much material can be collected, who will collect it, how often, how do we value this, how can we leverage truck backfill journeys and disused council land, how can we sort of enrol all of that, what is to hand into the process, and finally, how can we best work within the current rules while the regulatory environment, and as we know with organics, or maybe it's different here, like everything else better here, I don't know, it's taking a while to catch up. So how can we move around the rules until that context changes? And finally, a really key issue for everyone was the importance of collecting data to measure the benefits at each point in the chain and to communicate impact and value through storytelling. And that was a challenging one because, as the hauler said, I never collect waste without collecting data, but the idea of a data commons or sharing of that mechanism wasn't there yet. So that was also something that needed to be invented. Probably the most significant thing that the workshop achieved was it helped build a social alliance. The sharing of knowledge and innovative practical ideas did more than 1,000 reports could do because everyone in the room was learning on the job already and being valued for what they already know and do. What we were really missing was the orchestration of that collective, and that's what the workshop helped to achieve. As Michelle said, the technology is actually very easy. It's the social organisation part of it that is hard. In the 18 months since the initial workshop, we've continued to meet with the group to plan a larger pilot as a basis for ongoing social learning. You learn more about the problems and the solutions this way, but it's all good, right? You're kind of developing your resilience. In the process, we've widened the circle to include multinationals operating in the same industry, farmers working on larger acreages with experience in commercial composting, and other potential industry partners.
Okay. Did you miss that last paragraph there?
Yeah. I'm not sure about that paragraph.
Better move on then. On the fly editing. Okay, so we're going to talk about a second project here, and we're coming in for a crash landing at this point. So the second project we wanted to talk about was one looking at the benefits of reuse, social, economic, and ecological. In the Measuring the Benefits of Reuse project, we partnered with Charitable Reuse Australia, which is the peak body in the sector. So this project involved developing a framework to calculate the value of reuse using point-of-sale data. We didn't realize we could just borrow it from Jay's website, as well as qualitative approaches for capturing the meaning and significance of reuse. So one organization we worked with was a project called Substation 33, which is a subsidiary of a faith-based organization, YSF, that works in disadvantaged Logan County just south of Brisbane. Their primary objective is to use electronics waste and recycling to provide training and livelihood opportunities for people in Logan, including those at a distance from the labor market. So, but Substation, which is located in a disused council building from which it gets its name, began to develop something else with help from volunteers and staff. So initially, one thing that they did was they rehomed computers that were discarded from the corporate and public sector donors, computers that were used for 3 years and then the lease ends, and then they just discard them, and then they rehomed them in communities in Logan, particularly during COVID times. This was really important for young people. Then they took the graphics and memory cards from computers that they couldn't rehome, and these gleaned electronics were combined with lithium batteries to invent an array of devices. The batteries are subject to stringent testing and sorting by rate of discharge and battery life. This process takes a couple of months, and then they're put to work. So, for example, Substation tech experts partnered with area high school and university students to invent road signs that light up when the flood comes in, the float goes up, the sign comes on, and then it sends an email to local councils. And in the same vein, they invented smart buoys that measure water levels in Queensland rivers. And these rivers were experiencing a 100-year flood every 2 weeks in 2022, if you'll remember that year. So this organization uses tracking to measure the process of reuse, tracking the mood, skills development, and capacities of volunteers. In the 6 hours that we were there doing interviews, former volunteers were returning to drop in, catching up, showing off babies, and reconnecting. So this is a place, not just a social enterprise. Inventive reuse unfolded through a combination of skills and materials, while meaning seemed to emanate through the people involved. Reuse's reinvention was not just in the things, but between the people, community-based organizations, universities, and local governments. So that's the reuse's reinvention part. So if we take the circular economy as an aspirational ideal, then the image of an achievable one, it should not only be about recovering value, but also about generating future economic, ecological, and social possibilities, such as the distribution of surplus products back to communities and the environment, and the repair and care of commons that support life. We see the university, where we're currently working, as playing a crucial role in this process as a space for discovery, experimentation, data sharing, social learning, and innovation. That's it, and what do you know? It's 12 o'clock. I don't know how that happens. There's the messiness of composting. So thanks for your attention.
Slightly rosy picture of the university there at the end, but
Aspirational.
There's always
There's aspiration. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. How are we? Oh, good. Thank you. Jay, do you want to join these guys up here? I could see the escalating reciprocity in Substation 33 as you were talking about it, to put it in Jay's language. And yeah, it was really nice to see the way that your work intersects, but it's also quite different. So thank you for bringing that to us. We're now going to open up for a time of questions, but first I'll just give Jay an opportunity to provide any reflections on their talk. You don't have to, it's an opportunity. And then open up to the audience for questions. And please wait till you have a mic, because this session is being web streamed, and we want our whānau at home to be able to hear what you say.
If there's any questions?
That was your opportunity and you missed it. No, you can have that one.
1, 2. Oh, is it on? Oh.
Yeah, no, I don't have any meaningful reflections, only that it's just really cool. and it just reminds me a lot of the work in the organisations I help, that I'm not involved in the sort of work that you're doing, but I'm involved in helping those kind of organisations communicate the work that they're doing. And yeah, you just look at it and you think, well, all those positive impacts that fall out of something like Substation 33, it's like the connectedness to other people, it's the sense of purpose, it's it's all this stuff that sits behind the obvious bit of recycling batteries that I think for me is the bit where I'm like, oh, this is adding quality of life benefits. Is that being recognised? And it's like, how many layers of social impacts are sitting there? So yeah, cool stuff.
Adrian.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you all so much for that rich kōrero that you have all given. I just have a question for Jay. I really was so interested in the stats that you had behind wahine Māori in business, and I was just wanting to know, are you able to just share a little bit more about those key drivers that you've seen this explosion with wahine Māori being self-employed? Is it coming from, Māori women's development? Is it coming from funding panels like Potama? And also on the back of that, is there any specific industries you're seeing open up? Like, is it wahine Māori using ancestral knowledge for starting their business? Like, is there anything interesting that you could share along that? Ngā mihi.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, that survey's a little bit old and they stopped doing it, which is a real shame because I want to see how that's changed. But from what I remember, a lot of it comes from a caring role to begin with. You know, there is this feature that wahine Māori are playing, this role they're playing that helps other people, and that tends to escalate into being a business of some kind. So it's like, well, I've been helping these young people with kapahaka and now I run a school. And it always seemed, from what I saw, to grow out of not having an intention to create a business. It was having an intention to help other people that ended up being a business. And yeah, that was the pathway. But I mean, it's been a few months since I looked at it, but I think you'll find wahine Māori existing in all those self-employed stats, those business starting stats. What's behind it, I really don't know. You probably have a better idea than me, I'm sure.
So for our Australian friends, wahine Māori means Māori woman. Yeah, businesses that Jay was talking about. Yeah.
Oh, me.
Yep, Catherine at the back there, and then here, and then over here.
Yeah, thanks so much. I've got a related question, I think, because it's really taken, Jay, with your representation of money, cash, as a language. Really like that way of thinking about it. It's really useful. And at the same time, when you were talking about the even split between paid and unpaid work for wahine Māori, and you talked about that being problematic because unpaid equals unrecognised in your calculations. So, and I'm curious about that. I want to ask you about that a bit more. Because, of course, there are other ways to recognise. And it seems like you're working with a lot of groups and people who do, in fact, recognise the worth of stuff other than money. So it's a particular sector of society for whom money is the only way that things are valued, or the most important way that things are valued, and you're kind of helping talk to them. But do you see a shift happening? Because it's clear that there's a groundswell here. It's clear that there's organisations and people who are bringing different ways of valuing to the fore. Is there hope that we can move beyond this? The only way to properly see the value of something is to attach a dollar amount. I would really like to like to find a way around that. And I'm wondering what your reflections are, and as well onto Abby and Stephen, how you are thinking about the way the work that you're seeing in those spaces is valued in different ways.
See, I think I need to start by sort of clarifying where I see my work, and it's not in changing the system. And that's so what I mean by that is I work with all these incredible researchers whose work is focused on the way we do things is not good enough. We need to change it to a better way of doing things. Yeah, and that's not my work. And it used to be, and it's not these days. And the way I see my work is you're operating in a system that's inequitable, it's challenging, you're not in a best position to win within this current system, and I'm here to help you. So the way I see it is I'm leaving the system change to others because I can't do everything, and I'm going to focus on helping these organizations navigate the current system. And the current system is you demonstrate your value in quantitative terms and you put a dollar to it. And so, you know, the organizations I work with are like Education Trust, Mental Health Trust, Sports Trust. They're all these incredible organizations. They can't wait till the system changes. They have to get the funding now within the current system so they can keep having that impact on their community. And, you know, I desperately hope that it changes over time and that we do no longer need to quantify things in dollars. I think it's a silly way to do things, even though it's what I do for a job. And so, you know...
You'll retire one day.
So that's sort of the position I take, is that there's better people out there to to change the system than me. I'm going to help you work within the current system. The other thing I'm really explicit about is that I focus on the positive stories in Te Ao Māori and the Māori economy. That means I'm not talking about all the problems. And there are numerous problems there, but I got tired of writing about the deficits in Māori, and I thought, look, Māori need the story of the amazing things they do and all the success they have, and no one's telling that story. Everyone's telling the story about the deficits and the problems. And, you know, I'm not saying they're telling it to Māori. I'm saying these stories are coming from Māori too. And I think that's important to have that out there. Once again, I can't do both, so I'm going to talk about the amazing things and leave the other bits to other people. So that's sort of my position, is I agree with you, and I'm not doing anything about it.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I will, but shall I go first?
Yeah, why not?
Oh. It's okay, you can go on. Yeah. Gosh, there's so much to say. Thanks, Jay, for what you've just said. I think it again resonates with a lot of the work we do, because there's a big deficit analysis on the communities that we work with, and we spend a lot of time trying to amplify, push, or find ways to do that. Not so much in number, but it's a similar effort. As far as what Kat's just asked us, I think we spend a lot of time in the university trying to hide the amount of time and labour that we attach to things that we care about, trying to find ways to work around, because the minute some of those things are costed, we're barred from doing them. So that's one response. But where our little presentation ended up is more so how we feel that the university needs to become more of a community space and to host events, to be a site of care and reciprocity and exchange, to be a place where social initiatives can work out and experiment and fail and get their knees skinned without actually fundamentally hurting their bottom line, because our core business is research. So you come in, try stuff out, and we'll pay for that. We'll pay for the failure of those things, because that's our core business. We can write about it, or we can do something that we can call research. At the moment, we can still do that, but it's getting a bit tight. But yeah, so we're trying to kind of, in a sense, protect our capacity to use the university's resources, and part of that is kind of hiding at the moment some of that value. I feel like that usually. It's been
Sorry.
on record. Yeah. Oh dear.
I guess just to tack on to what Abby was saying, there are other stories I could have told you just from that last project. So, for instance, there's this incredible group in Melbourne called Our Village, and they were started in St Kilda by 5 mums who were sitting in a postnatal care ward looking at all the prams and car seats and cots that were being piled up there, waiting to be distributed to families in need. And these 5 women said, we're going to do something about this in 2009. And here we are 20 years later. They're now operating across all of Melbourne now as Our Village. And their goal is to find ways to rehome high-value baby care items to meet the total need in the state of Victoria. And they're in a position to do it because all of them were masters of logistics. So they were able to marshal 44,000 hours of volunteer labor, including from the corporate sector, and move through all this material. They've invented repair sites. They work with social workers to rehouse the goods. So they're leveraging a particular kind of relationship with the state, reinventing public-private partnership. And this is 5 women who started this, and it's not for profit, but because they're so good at impact reporting, they get lots of support. So I guess for me, it's like the world already is changing. That's just one other example. I could give you dozens and dozens of organizations that are already thinking about how to do things in profoundly different ways. And so for me, it's not the end of capitalism. It's just that it no longer becomes synonymous with the economy, and it seeds into the background in the face of all other kinds of ways in which people are making things, sharing things, and meeting needs. That's all happening. Yeah, and university can help even while it's falling apart.
Where is the other mic? Wait, sorry, because we're webcasting, we need mics. And we do also have a list, so if it's just a quick question that builds on that, go for it, and then we're over here. Yeah.
Just a quick question. How do you think we amplify those stories of people doing that? Like in New Zealand, there's a place called Warming Hearts that does the same thing with pre-loved baby gear, but I don't think a lot of people know about it.
Well, I mean, I can connect you with the people from our village. I think, in the United States, we use that language from Dean Spade of mutual aid. And oftentimes in post-COVID, that was a way that people were taking care of one another. I think that can be done on a interorganizational basis. So in our other project where we're looking at climate adaptation and social housing, we're working with a filmmaker to make a film saying, look, yep, thermal safety and housing is one thing, but building strong and cohesive communities to respond to climate change, that's something else. And that's something where we're learning from really our elders, the people who are living in this housing who know how to do that stuff. And like our obligation is to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question here. Yeah.
Kia ora, thank you so much for your talking today. It's been amazing. I do have a question. Jay, you touched on it a little bit when you talked about focusing on the positive. But my question is, I work in food rescue and we spend a lot of time sending out data stats to our stakeholders. We've rescued this much food this month that equals this many meals or this much water saved or this much, da-da-da. We spend a lot of time doing that. And I just thinking about what you said, Abby, about measuring the good as well as the bad. Do we need to flip the script a little bit and say, if we didn't do this, this is what would happen? Do you think that would help with funding applications and things like that? I mean, I like to focus on the positive too, but it's not always working at the moment, especially with our government that we have at the moment. I'm hoping the webcaster didn't pick that up. I'm just wondering about flipping the script a little bit. Like, is it a good idea or is it a really stupid idea? Is it a really dumb question? I don't know.
No, it's not a dumb question at all. So I'm thinking of our colleague in the United States, Kelly and mine, and Abby's, a fellow by the name of George DiMartino. What was the name of that book that he just wrote?
The Tragic Science.
The Tragic Science.
How economists don't recognise harm or something.
So he's a trained economist speaking to economists, and he talks about this concept of harm-centered economics. And so one of the tools that they use for thinking about that is what they call counterfactual examples. So that would be a demonstration of that. What happens if we don't do this? But where he ends the book is this idea of, well, actually, quantification and return on investment and cost-benefit analysis, those are all strategies that aren't really capturing how to respond to the profound existential risk that we're in right now with climate change. So he turns in the final chapter of his book to something called decision-making under deep uncertainty, which reminds me a lot of your ACAD or whatever the acronym was there, the decision-making. Yeah. So, and basically the example he gives is how in the Colorado River system, they're trying to convene all the stakeholders to think about, when we allocated the water, we had the wrong measurement. It was a high water mark in the 1920s. And now we're in a situation where we've got millions and millions of people depending on this water. What do? Well, we turn to the stakeholders. We use complex adaptive system management. But what's interesting is who developed decision-making under deep uncertainty? It was actually the RAND Corporation, which was an outgrowth of the Navy from the Second World War. So on some level, his point is saying that, like, economics as we've known it, which is that CBA-style approach, cost-benefit analysis, economistic kind of thinking, that's literally dying out in the United States, and it's being replaced with experimental economics and other heterodox approaches. So, I don't want to, again, paint too rosy of a picture, but I think that idea, the powerful counter-narrative and counterfactual, is a part of that process. But then it makes economics into a conversation.
Just one quick thing, just from a design perspective, like a lot of the reason we're in this situation is because of design. And so I think, people often think design is a sort of creative thing, and it certainly is, but it is also a practice that is consequence. And so part of understanding what we design, what we put out into the world, is understanding the consequences of those things. So I think it is really critical to take a sort of somewhat of a precautionary principle to what we plan. So when we do eco-design or sustainable design, there's a million words for these things. Part of it is planning across a life cycle what are the intended consequences and what are the unintended and likely consequences, because every time you make something, you also destroy something. You cannot make without destruction. You build a table, you cut down a tree. So those are things that we need to take better account of, particularly where design's kind of normative intent has been to produce more and more and more stuff. So I think we need new measures, but I also think it's very powerful to point out harms, because, the world isn't just sitting there benignly, it's growing. The problems are growing, the harms are growing, and there's an exponential increase in those harms. Some of them are visible, some of them are invisible, and at a micro scale, we need to be able to see and understand what it is we are contributing to. Yeah.
Jay, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think it's not changing what you're doing. It's largely a communications exercise.
Yeah.
And at that point, when I would do a social impact report, I have a technical report, and then I might have 4 reports that come out of that, and they're all directed towards a particular audience, and they're all completely different. So, the one that goes to the government, because they're looking for funding, that'll have your BCR, your benefit cost ratio, your NPV, your net present value. It's based on setting that counterfactual, like Stephen said, and then looking at the difference and quantifying it. The one that goes to the community that supports that organisation has none of that in it. It's got quotes, it's got stories, and so it's, I think, about identifying what that particular audience you want to convince, or you want to talk to, what information they want, and giving it to them in that format. And for the people around you, your sort of community, that might not be the positive story that they want. That might be to actually highlight the real negative harms, and that's why you were doing this in the first place. And so, yeah, it's sort of tailoring. Yeah.
Great, and you had a question. Where's our mic? Oh, Andrew's coming.
Abby and Stephen, I was struck by your reflections on the Ellen MacArthur butterfly diagram. And so if we think about that as a kind of normative model that's spread around as the circular economy, seen as that, that would then, I imagine, dictate how you think about how you measure the circular economy and focus on certain types of metrics. Whereas I was also struck by the quote from your participant who's, the tech is easy, it's the social organisation part that's hard. So I'm thinking if that's the bit, that's the challenge, what kind of measures do you think we should actually be focusing on?
Okay.
We can talk.
So I'm thinking of a kindred spirit over in Australia to Jay, and is it Ingrid Burkett? Her name? Yes.
Familiar, but I can't remember.
Joe's McNeil's colleague.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, at Substation 33, they had 2 social workers that were there full time, and when they were getting people in who were arriving there to pay off their spark debt, so like back child support and other things, they might come in feeling really angry and sort of not ready for work. So they actually developed this kind of bespoke assessment of how people were feeling and how they were doing, and measured it over time. So for me, like that was something that one of our colleagues invented, that was kind of a measurement of, I guess, growing levels of social cohesion and belonging. And then, oh, gee, that's pretty cool. And you can share it. I can share it with you if you're interested. But to me, like, measuring the social dynamics in an ongoing way could be something that social enterprises like Substation 33 can do to improve their efficacy, right? So it's not an end in itself, and it's not just reporting to funders or whoever's interested. It's the measurement becomes functional to building the relationships through time. And to me, that seems to be really important. Now, why is that important for the circular economy? The Ellen MacArthur Foundation more recently has come to understand the importance of the social and solidarity economy in achieving all of its outcomes. So that's now, the language is shifting, even in that sort of very rarefied NGO world. I think, to something that's much more akin to what we've been interested in as a group. Yeah, and not just them, the United Nations has made similar proclamations about the importance of the social and solidarity economy and achieving the SDGs. Now, I don't know, are those the right measures either? I'm not sure.
I think they're valuable measures. I mean, I think the other one would be social learning, because, you know, we tend to leap over all that we have to learn about, like some of the things that we pointed out. So, yeah, I think that would be something that I have no metric for that, other than, you know, measuring the mood in the room, and particularly if you're working with cohorts over time, there is a capacity to measure that. But yes, I think there's a lot that we need to point to in Jay's language. You know, that is the power of this work, is, you know, the kind of semiotic dimension. We create new measures, we create new indicators, we create visibility of things that haven't been valued before. And yeah, we need to spend more time thinking about how we do that. Jay, did you want to add to that? Or?
I got nothing to add to
Nothing to add. Okay, we've got time We've got about 4 minutes before lunch. I can smell it. We've got 2 more questions. Is it Tammy here? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Jay, you said you don't think you're changing the system. I'm a measurement geek, and I believe that when you communicate information really effectively, you can change a system, because you change how people value things, their perspective on things. So really, it's not a question, it's a comment. I think that effective measurement of impact, and when I say effective, nothing. This would be an interesting question. Nothing truly can be entirely quantified and measured in dollar terms, but money is what makes the world go round. We have to accept that, and the only way we change that system is by making them see us see things in a different way. So yes, it'd be interesting if you could, or if you've ever thought about valuing the impact of the measurement of impact, and how that and how that might change, and how that might change the systems that we say we're not changing.
Say that bit again. So measuring the impact of measuring the impact.
Measuring the impact of valuing impact.
Oh, yes.
on how it affects change in the system. Because I believe it would affect change in the system. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's so, no, it is, it makes total sense to me. There's a man, Professor Hugh Campbell at Otago University, and I can't remember the name of the science. It's like metrologies or something, and it's the study of measuring things that are measured or something. It's like the quantum physics observer effect or something. If you look at it, does it change? But yeah, I totally take your point, and I think it's that I'm not explicit about talking about systems and our need to change them. Not that I don't hope that what I'm doing is having an impact and changing them. Otherwise, I wouldn't be spending 10 hours a week writing stuff for LinkedIn and guides and things, you know. I don't need the work. It's just that I think if this stuff is out there, people will act differently. And I guess that's the thing. Like, if you put a number on something, does it change that thing, or does it attract people towards that thing? And I think it does. I think it attracts funding towards that thing just for the act of valuing it and quantifying it. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. But I have never seen a study of impact valuation and its ability to increase impact. So, fascinating. I mean, what a cool study.
Yeah.
Anyone want to do that?
Yeah. Okay, we got time for one more question, and then we'll be stretching our legs and filling our bellies. Yeah, Georgia.
Kia ora, this is for Jay. As I'm interested in both taututu and it's like the idea of degrowth and post-growth. So, but I can't really consolidate those two things in my head because, yeah, I guess you know what I mean. But have you thought about those two and tried to consolidate them?
Just flip that tornado upside down and it'll make sense. It's, yeah, totally. I mean, the taututu model totally fits with a degrowth agenda in that you're putting the effort into Māori and instead of into economic capital or physical capital or something. So you're saying, look, we're going to use the currency of social interaction, of innovation, of enterprise, and we're going to direct that towards enhancing Māori. And in order to do that, we need to make less stuff, we need to buy less stuff, we need to be more efficient with our material use. And I think it's a model that escalates Māori and escalates, a degrowth agenda just as well as it would escalate crypto. I think it applies. It's an ethic rather than a model or a framework, and that ethic is directed towards, reciprocal, mutual benefits, escalation over time. You can point it at whatever you want, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, tēnā tātou, that's us for this session. Dearly has some gifts for our speakers, which are wonderful circular gifts because I found them in an administrator's cupboard, because these are the legendary Massey pen, that it's a refillable pen that people have been given for many decades, that's no longer available because people mocked it. But we found them. These are classic, and you can refill them. So they're circular in multiple ways. Yes, but thank you so much for speaking to us. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Haere ki te kai.
So, give us. Do you want this microphone?
Kia ora and welcome back. I hope everyone is feeling energised after lunch. I'm Graydon Diprose. I'm on the organising group. I'm an environmental social scientist at the Bioeconomy Science Institute. So this session, we've got 8 presenters, and they are speaking from different perspectives, focusing on the food and the fibre sectors. We asked our presenters to pose kind of 3 questions. What innovation have you seen in your industry? What barriers do you face? And what research needs do you have in relation to circularity? So that was kind of the brief, but people are interpreting that in ways that make, is meaningful for them. So just to kind of, this whole symposium has been funded by Massey University through a strategic something fund, and research something fund. And the point is to connect university with industry, and so that's why we're focusing on food and fibre, because that's a key strategic focus for Massey University. So our first presentation is by Craig Anderson, and Craig is a science team leader from the Bioeconomy Science Institute. So he's prepared a presentation that actually focuses on energy in relation to the primary production sector in New Zealand. So we're starting with that because it's kind of setting a bit of a scene for some of the stuff that might come later. And the other reason we're starting with him is because there has been some kind of criticism of circular economy research that claims that it's kind of blind to the energy implications, particularly fossil fuel, peak oil, peak diesel, that kind of stuff. So he's going to be talking about that. Some of it's quite technical, but there's some really interesting stuff here in terms of thinking about the future of circularity. So yeah, this is pre-recorded, so I'm just going to hit play, and hopefully this will all work.
Kia ora. I'm Craig, and I'm a biogeoscientist with the Bioeconomy Science Institute. The rough brief for this presentation was to highlight the significance of energy and transitions with respect to circular economies. A very tough ask in 10 minutes. My interest in energy stems from the work of ecologist Howard Odum, who in the early 70s pioneered the concept of energy return on energy invested, or EROEI, or to put another way, the energy cost of energy. The concept is simple. In biology, it is 100% unsustainable if an organism uses more energy finding food than it gets in return after eating the food. This concept can be applied across many scales and disciplines, from a single microbial cell through to modern civilization, with the latter being what we will concern ourselves with today. There are three main take-homes from this presentation. The first is we are blind to the enormous amount of hidden energy that supports our civilization. The second is that energy is the economy, whether it's circular or not. And the third is an energy transition will happen, but don't expect it to resemble what has been advertised. What is EROEI? To date, we've used roughly 50% of Earth's fossil fuel endowment of oil, gas, and coal. Starting from the left-hand side of this figure, when we first started extracting fossil fuels, it was easy. We'd put 1 barrel of oil energy equivalent in, that's the pale blue, and get 100 barrels out, the darker blue, an EROEI of 100 with a little cost to GDP, which is the red line. Now we have to go offshore, we're drilling deeper, we're applying new technologies, and we are sourcing oil from more difficult geological conditions. It now costs us at least 10 barrels of oil energy equivalent to get 100 barrels out, an EROEI of 10 or lower, and the GDP cost is higher. If we examine all other raw materials, it is the same story. We've taken the easy, low-hanging fruit first, and what's left is much harder, more energy intensive, and more expensive to get. In the meantime, our population has expanded exponentially, and so have our expectations. The estimated EROEI to sustain our current civilization at a basic level is 7, and we've been flirting with 7 for some time. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is this guy talking about fossil fuels? Aren't we transitioning? And the answer is kinda, maybe. The global economy is still more than 90% reliant on fossil fuels. Despite global renewable electricity generation capacity reaching 33% and increasing, the electricity sector only supplies around 1/5 of overall energy used globally, while energy demand is increasing. With this in mind, New Zealand finds itself in the lucky position of having 80 to 85% renewable electricity. However, in reality, our economy is 70% fossil fuel dependent when considering our overall energy needs. The electricity sector and the renewables within are also entirely dependent on fossil fuels for mining raw materials and turning those raw materials into electrical supply infrastructure such as concrete, steel, aluminium, copper, solar panels, turbines, etc. And for maintenance, upgrading, expansion, replacement, recycling, and disposal of infrastructure components when they reach end of life. In this context, renewables are better termed rebuildables and are currently icing on the cake. To enable comparison of apples to apples, EROEI calculations should consider all energy used to deliver energy at the point of use. For example, supply of petrol at the pump versus electricity at an EV charging station. If EROEI is only calculated with respect to the energy at the source rather than at the point of use, we greatly underestimate the actual energy required to run and maintain our complex civilization. On this diagram, coal at the mine has an EROEI of 80, but in reality the net energy delivered is much lower as there are transport losses, thermal losses, transmission losses, etc. EROEI can improve with technology, but not much. We no longer have an energy source combination that can deliver an EROEI higher than 10 at the scales required to meet our expectations. Connecting energy to the economy requires us to look at how much net energy is delivered that can support economic activity. The increase in red arrow thickness represents the larger volume of energy required to get energy as EROEI deteriorates. If the volume of energy is expanding, then we don't really notice deterioration in EROEI, but economic growth rates likely contract. However, if expansion of energy supply slows down or stops, the net energy for driving economic activity and delivering essentials to society is constrained, leading to persistent inflation in all goods and services. All economic activity consumes energy sources of all types at varying scales. Any perturbation in energy supply quickly impacts economic activity, our ability to support human development needs, and to deliver on other goals like environmental restoration. Energy is the economy. This is probably the most important correlation that economists seem to ignore. There are no rich countries that consume low amounts of energy. Prosperity, measured as GDP, is highly correlated to energy use. Very crudely, on this graph, a halving of energy availability would result in about a 30% reduction in GDP. The same is approximately true for social progress. Countries with low energy struggle to lift social progress. This is very nuanced here, though, with respect to governance. I'm not sure where New Zealand sits on this graph, but we usually have a good social progress score, and our oil use per capita is slightly higher than Denmark, so we probably reside somewhere on the graph around Denmark. Why are global economies sputtering? Simply put, fossil fuel production has stagnated pre-COVID, and overall EROEI has potentially dropped below 7. Notice that preceding major economic recessions in the mid-70s, early 80s, the 90s, the dot-com crash in 2000, and the 2008 financial crisis, there were perturbations in oil production. Most of these recessionary periods were relieved when new extraction methodologies became economic and matured, such as offshore drilling techniques in the North Sea in the 80s, that's the light grey, and fracking post-2008, that's the bright yellow. When we have plentiful oil, we have excess energy to put into economic growth. With respect to the foundations of the economy that you and I interact with every day, the fraction of oil that is the most important is diesel. Diesel runs tractors, think agriculture, trucks, trains, ships, think supply chains, mining equipment, think commodities, etc. Although oil production has been going up since 2008 because of fracking, the resulting shale oil, also known as light tight oil, has a very small heavy fraction from which diesel is derived. Diesel production stagnated after 2008. Declining global diesel inventories now underpins the cost of living crisis, as all aspects of our lives are touched by diesel. Lack of economic growth opportunities in the energy-intensive productive economy have disappeared, while the low energy-intensive unproductive economy, the so-called FIRE economy, finance, insurance, real estate, has exploded, along with inequality and unconventional ways to juice the economy, such as quantitative easing. If the energy cost of energy is properly accounted for in economic models, then it becomes clear that prosperity, the red lines and the graphs on the right, will decline, as energy constraints will mean we will spend more on securing energy for delivering essentials. This is true for all countries and underpins the great power politics and social upheavals we're witnessing today, as resource scarcity is now colliding with monetary hegemony. In your daily lives, research and businesses, in fact any of your endeavours, it will become imperative to consider how to minimise resource and energy use. Any inputs derived from elsewhere in the economy, or even inputs that are considered waste products, have an energy footprint, or will require energy input and other resources to transform them from waste into something useful. There are also infrastructure and supply chains to consider, with a small country in the Southwest Pacific becoming less attractive as the cost of acquiring energy and resources escalates. My advice would be to degrow, think local and act local as our energy landscape transforms. Okay, that's it. If you want to hear the full story about diesel, or you would like a more agriculture-focused assessment, then please contact me.
Let's give him a clap. In conversations with Craig, while we were talking about this, he said lots of his colleagues don't want to hear this story. And you can, yeah. And I mean, I feel like we've seen it play out with local government elections where there were debates, people don't want rates rises, but they're inevitable, right? Because we've got, as kind of Craig pointed out, all of the maintenance infrastructure, all that kind of stuff, is linked to diesel. Craig isn't here, so we're not going to take time for questions, so we're going to move straight on. Next up, we have Emily Levinson. Emily's an environmental policy advisor at Horticulture New Zealand, and she works on policy related to resource management, climate change, freshwater, land, energy, and waste. Welcome up, Emily.
I think Jacob was up next, but...
Oh, okay, yes.
But thank you.
So, I'd like to welcome Jacob Laws. Yay! Jacob is a project manager at the AgriChain Centre and does a lot of work on horticulture and arable and horticulture mainly, yeah.
Mostly, yeah. Food supply chains. Yep.
Thank you, Jacob. Oh, just so the format, Jacob will probably speak for between 5 and 8 minutes, and then we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stand up if
Yep.
you're going too long.
Okay, so let's see if this works. Yes. All right, so normally this takes 2 hours. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to rush through this. So here's who I am, project manager, technical advisory group's project manager and sustainability representative for the pan produce body United Fresh, New Zealand representative on the Sustainability Committee for the International Federation for Produce Standards, and manager of the industry publication Fresh Facts, which deals with data collection, data analysis and publication on all the facts and stats about the fresh produce industry, from the farm through to the retail. And I have a Master's of Sustainable Development Goals focused on data and governance and how do you prove you are sustainable. Sustainability, my background, I've been working in this industry for 15 years now. Sustainability, we're up to about 8 to 9 years, been working on sustainability both within New Zealand and internationally, working for MFAT on sustainable cocoa production, Tonga agricultural diagnostics, MFE on the National Policy Statement, Freshwater Management and Vegetables Review, industry sustainability guidelines, and also just recently we've just finished developing and releasing a quick wins assessment tool on helping businesses measure and improve their sustainability. And then looking at sustainable consumption, we've got MPI, supply chain resilience and COVID, as well as supply chain reviews on how supply chains could be optimised in New Zealand for a significant national retailer. So circularity, it's the typical theory behind sustainable resource use, in that we have our circle. However, like everything else, we often see talks about the circularity in the same vein as sustainability, where you'll see talks of sustainable growth, sustainability, consistency, sustainable returns, and sustainable practices. And you'll often see these in documents, annual reports, letters from the chair, PR press releases, quotes at media releases. Anything that a company may or a business may put out, you'll often hear the word sustainable. But where's the proof? Well, our observations from the industry and from collecting the data is that the talk is much more common than the action. But this is down to a couple of reasons. Misunderstandings about the extent of what sustainability is and what it means for people, an overly narrow focus on particular aspects while ignoring the rest of it, goals and targets without SM, AR or T, reliance on the laws and regulations to force people to do the job on the assumption that if the government's not regulating it, well, it obviously doesn't matter, passing the buck on the basis that, well, we can wait for someone else to do it better, or even just awaiting the worst offenders of, well, I'm the best in the industry, why should I improve until everyone gets on my level? And you'll see here just 3 particular examples from New Zealand for the last year or so of these particular actually occurring in the news. So the reality is, like everything else in a particular supply chain, is circularity, especially in the food industry, is actually a leaky tyre. That while we're hoping for lots of reuse and going through the supply chain, most of it's actually heading through to the disposal step. So measuring the leaks, do things like these look familiar to you people? Yes? Well, you're saying, hey, energy consumption up, renewable energy here, good, numbers nice. Well, but how do you get these? How do you build these? Well, in our case, we've got an international framework that you can use called the Sustainable Development Goals that actually allows us, both as an organisation or an industry or as a country, to actually build against an internationally accepted framework with goals, targets and indicators. So we've got a system which has the specifics, the measurable, the achievable, the realistic and the time-bound. So this system is fully smart-based. And it's already made for us. It's one that we can use, and it's even been put out by the United Nations, which makes it an additional plus if we can say, well, it wasn't us who did this, it was the big boys. So for us in the industry, well, you can lead the horse to water. United Fresh published this a couple of years ago, the Sustainable Development Goals Guidelines, teaching about, in a New Zealand context, how we could do this for the fresh produce industry. Gave a link to the government's work of the Government Indicators Aotearoa 2019, and it showed how we can actually convert larger goals such as the SDG framework into actual specific and implementable actions within the fresh produce industry. But you'll note here we're talking about it as a guideline. It's a guideline, but it's not actually doing the measurement, which was left to the businesses because the businesses should know what's best for them. However, when we get to the actual looking at what a business is actually implementing, so United Fresh publishes a little book called Fresh Facts, as I said, which is the facts and stats for the industry, looking at what is actually happening in the industry. And it's data focused, and we've got stuff such as the Sustainable Development Guidelines now built into it, as well as other frameworks such as the Aotearoa Horticulture Action Plan, which is supposed to take us out to 2035, looking at what and how we measure, because we need to make sure that we're measuring optimally and that we're using accurate data for our ultimate outcomes. And we're continuing to expand the amount of pages and data in this related to sustainability. But when we start to look at the numbers, uptake's limited. Lots of people talking, almost 94% of people are saying we're sustainable. When we're actually looking at use of frameworks or even just mentioning frameworks, we're down at 30% already. When we start to get to the actual adoption or measurement of frameworks, we're down to 16 to 17%. So only about 1 in 6 of us are actually using a recognised framework or telling people we're using a recognised framework for the measurement of sustainability in the industry. And I can't give you too much more about the 2025 reports because unfortunately Fresh Facts 2025 is not out until next week or so, but yeah, so lots of people mentioning it, but not actually measuring the reality. So how do we actually measure the reality? Well, that's where you need tools and assessments that are available, such as this one, which, as I said, has just recently been developed by the AgriChain Centre. So saying, hey, look, let's actually assess you from frameworks such as the SDGs to tell you how are you actually doing as opposed to what you think you're doing. Because the reality is your unsubstantiated data is no better than propaganda. It's just words. And you need this data because the data-backed results can support the appropriate governance and legal operations. Because when an auditor comes to you and goes, where's your documentation? You go, I don't have it, I'm just vibing. The auditor's going to sit there and go, no. So in summary, we're currently seeing an over-reliance on others to make things better. Data is an essential priority to walk the talk. Frameworks are important, but just as important is actually measurement, because while you may be having a framework, if you're not measuring, well, auditor still says no. The industry data has consistently shown that words are not matching actions, meaning that we, as an industry, as a business, as a nation, as a globe, need to start actually assessing our sustainability on the basis of data and not just letting the words. But there are tools that you can assess yourself in New Zealand or in an industry-specific manner. There's no need to rely on overseas companies or overseas measurements when you can go to New Zealand, when there are systems in New Zealand that you can use. And finally, if you're wanting to do sustainability, use data to ensure you walk the walk.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we've got time for one question. Jacob, is there any questions out there?
I have one if no one else has one. This might be a really dumb question, but how much of our fresh produce do we export? Or like what percentage of our fresh produce do we export overseas, if any? And I guess, is it going to be possible to reduce that number somehow and start making our fresh produce like cheaper here? And do you do any of that in your work, or like encourage any of that?
Yes, so export-wise, 80 to 90% of fruit, 20% of vegetables. Pricing-wise, jumping into the New Zealand market, as we saw in COVID, can cause pricing drops, but it actually does lead to further problems of a lot of the pricing around exports is different grades of product to what typically ends up in New Zealand, as well as different volumes, because a lot of what we export is kiwi fruit and apples, which leads to oversupply in the market far, far beyond what consumers are actually demanding. So you just end up with lots of product then just rotting. So it doesn't actually have the effect on prices that you might expect. And then some of it is often oversupply at certain periods where consumers might be wanting it later in the year, but it's not available at that time because it's rotted. So our imports and exports are actually balanced around conscious seasonal supply to ensure that there's food available and consumers want it. Yeah, so it does have some effect, but reducing it is not actually going to have the effect on prices that you might expect.
Thank you, Jacob.
Nice. And if anyone else wants to ask questions later, I've got plenty of business cards, so you can just email me them directly. Yeah, yes? Hi.
Cool, thank you.
No worries.
Now, so we have Emily now. Oh. Sorry, yes, Pounamu's not here. Why am I not looking at the thing, What is going on? Wow. Lessons on how not to cheer, Emily, come and take over, please.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to go now. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Emily Levinson, and I'm an environmental policy advisor at Horticulture New Zealand. We are the industry body that represents commercial fruit and vegetable growers in New Zealand. So we're levy funded. Every sale of fruits and vegetables goes towards our budget, and then we are advocates on behalf of those growers to government. Our growers are an incredibly diverse bunch, growing over 100 types of fruits and vegetables, and we represent all of them. So the first thing that I was asked to talk about today was a success story for the circular economy in the fruit and vegetable sector. And one of the parts of our sector that came to mind was the glasshouse industry. So you might know that lots of your vegetables are grown in glasshouses, and these glasshouses are heated in the winter so that you can access tomatoes all year round if you want to eat them all year round. This is an example of one particular massive glasshouse site, but in the middle what you see is the Reparoa Organic Waste Processing Plant. So this is where Auckland has curbside collection of their food scraps. Those food scraps are trucked 260 kilometers to Reparoa, where they go in these big anaerobic digesters. And one of the byproducts of this process is in biogas that's used to heat the glasshouses and grow lots of delicious tomatoes, mostly for the domestic market. What I think is the most interesting part of this facility is that a lot of glasshouse growers heat using natural gas, and one of the barriers for them of moving to other energy sources is that they capture CO2 from that natural gas and pump it into the glasshouses to improve plant yields. So without another source of CO2, it's really hard to economically justify moving to a different energy source. With this facility, they can capture the CO2 from the anaerobic digestion process, put it into the glasshouses. Amazing, beautiful, lots of tomatoes for New Zealanders. The thing that I look at when I see this is that this is great, but this is not very replicable, right? Like, this is one glasshouse business. Every glasshouse in New Zealand is not going to be able to co-locate with massive anaerobic digesters that are processing lots of food scraps from Auckland. So it's great if you've got lots of money, infrastructure investment, other uses for this facility, but this was not funded by growers on their own. So that's the bit that I want to talk about in this short talk, is that access to capital. And in order to understand the economic constraints on the vegetable industry in New Zealand, you have to understand some of those domestic economic dynamics. So this chart that I've made here, all of these lines represent monetary flows throughout our supply chain. So bigger line is more money of product and smaller line is less, and I just use money because that's the data that's available. But the most important thing to notice about this chart is that most of the vegetables consumed by New Zealand households are grown in New Zealand. And almost all of the vegetables grown in New Zealand are going to New Zealand households. That means that growers are operating within the domestic market, and so they're constrained by what's happening in that market. So what makes up the price of a vegetable? When you go to the supermarket and you buy a broccoli, why does it cost the amount that it does? Well, supermarkets price at the amount that consumers are willing to pay based on supply and demand. Within that price, growers have a lot of inputs that they have to pay for. So that's fertilizer, transportation, labor, compliance, sprays, packaging, et cetera. These costs have been going up a lot over time, which that presentation we just had about diesel is a great example of why some of those costs are going up very quickly. At the other end, we've got a supermarket duopoly, only really two major buyers for fresh vegetables. They take a markup, they take a profit off of that product, and most growers sell through wholesalers who take a markup as well. So whatever's left there, that is what the grower earns. And in recent years in particular, this has been getting smaller and smaller, with many vegetable growers even having to sell below the cost of production. I've heard from many growers telling me this is happening to them, and there are many growers thinking about exiting the market because they are not able to make a profit off of growing healthy, nutritious, delicious food for New Zealanders. So when it comes to waste, the cost of managing food loss has to fit within that dynamic. Right now, a lot of vegetable growers pay to truck their product that doesn't meet market specifications for animal feed. So if they could just have a cost-neutral option, amazing. They would definitely want to look into that. If you could get them an option that could add value, that could put some financial sustainability into their businesses, help them keep operating, that would be amazing. The thing is that in order to develop those products, you need some maybe capital for processing. You need a market of people who are willing to buy those products. So there are constraints there as well. And so I think it's really worth noticing that when you look at the value add products that currently exist in the horticulture sector, almost all of them come from the fruit sector. And that's what Jacob was telling us about, that a lot of fruit is for export. There's money in the industry to invest in things like, in the middle, that's a vegan leather alternative being developed from kiwi fruit residues by Scion. How cool. But in order to, they say that you can't be green if you're in the red. You need some money in order to participate in sustainability. And so that brings me to some of my research questions for all of you, is I really wonder, currently we import a lot of fruit and vegetable processed products. Are there opportunities for domestic sourcing instead? Take, for example, onion powder, which we import almost all of it from India. What if we could produce that from the material that we have here in New Zealand? But what would it take for that to be commercially viable? But also, are New Zealand consumers even willing to pay for New Zealand-produced products? Because they'll usually cost more than the imported option. And so if anyone can answer that question and how we can, build consumer appetite for paying more for New Zealand-produced products, that would be of huge value to our industry. So I'll just leave that there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Emily. We've got time for at least one or two questions. Yeah.
Have you been across what's happening in Hawke's Bay with the peaches and
Yes.
Waddies?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering if you can comment on...
Sure, that's actually in my speaker notes here.
Okay.
Look what's happening with Waddies canned peaches. For people who didn't see that news, Waddies recently cut supply contracts for a lot of our peach growers because New Zealanders don't want to pay more for New Zealand-grown canned peaches, and so they're importing instead. So if you want to think about what you as a consumer can do to support local supply of fruits and vegetables, it's buying local fruits and vegetables. Yeah.
Just a comment more than anything. I'm assuming you guys have been speaking to the government about tax breaks for local producers?
Tax breaks is not something that we currently advocate for, no.
The diagram you had showing where all the money goes and going to the majority going to the retailers and the wholesalers, is that's you haven't crunched any numbers to get that? That's just illustrative, is it?
It's just illustrative. I would love if someone could make this diagram with real numbers. That's my dream. I've been told it's not possible because the information is too commercially sensitive that no one would ever give it to you. But maybe Jacob can make it for us. Yeah.
The grower, the wholesale, the retail market stuff was released in Fresh Facts 2024 last year. Just the cost of imports was not released by growers. So the stuff beyond the farm gate was released, and we've worked out what goes to the growers, which is about 40% of the total cost that you pay at the supermarket. I think it's 42% of what you pay at the supermarket goes to the grower. But behind the farm gate, the costs the growers weren't willing to get. Yes, the 42% between the grower and the cost of imports.
So that kind of what that suggests to me is looking at more localized distribution systems. I'm just wondering about your group's thoughts about that.
I think that we operate based on scale, right? Like when I think about fruits and vegetables, I think about where are most New Zealanders buying their fruits and vegetables? And the answer is supermarkets. And that has to do with a lot of things, and most of it's convenience, and what's available to them. And so the opportunities to make a difference in this story at any scale for our industry, I think have to sit with relationships with the supermarkets. Yeah.
Final question here from Kelly.
What about community co-ops that buy together and get distributed to?
Wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous, love it. It's really small. It's like really small scale. Like when you look at, we have, I don't know what it is, like 700 vegetable growers, and how many of them would be contributing to those co-ops, and also how many people are being fed by those co-ops out of the 5 million who need to be fed in New Zealand. It's fantastic. It's just a tiny piece of the puzzle.
Lovely. Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Another sobering presentation. Okay, now I'm going to actually consult the order. So next up we have Hannah Blumhart. Sorry. Yes, Hannah Blumhart, lead researcher at Reuse Aotearoa and Zero Waste practitioner. Welcome, Hannah, who's going to be talking about packaging in the grocery sector.
Is it 5 minutes?
You've got 10 minutes total, so if you use your 10, you won't get any questions.
Oh, okay, no, I won't do that. Okay, cool. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Hannah tōku ingoa. I'm here speaking on behalf of Reuse Aotearoa, which is an organisation that investigates, researches reuse practices and organisational models for waste reduction and community building strategies. So I'm going to be talking today about this report that's literally just been released. Reusable packaging in the Aotearoa New Zealand grocery sector, understanding impacts and outcomes. So this was produced under the umbrella of Āmiomio Aotearoa, which is a multi-partner research project into the circular economy funded by MB's Endeavour Fund. It included researchers from Āmiomio Aotearoa, from Reuse Aotearoa, and from the Bioeconomy Science Institute, formerly Manaki Whenua, including Graydon. Why look at measuring the impacts and outcomes of reusable packaging? Well, hopefully you're all aware that moving from single-use to reusable packaging is a non-negotiable part of the transition to the circular economy. This is because every time you use a single-use package, you use it once and then it's thrown away. So this is an inherently linear business model. In contrast, reusable packaging is a classical circular business model because each container is designed to be reused multiple times, removing the need to continually extract raw materials to make new packaging and reducing loads of waste. Why look at this in the grocery sector? Because packaging is used across multiple sectors. It's because the grocery sector is heavily reliant on single-use packaging. As the United Nations Environment Programme has noted, single-use packaging dominates the supermarket food packaging almost completely. And this is a packaging type that touches all of our lives and brings disposable practices into people's everyday life. Measuring the impact of reusable packaging is not really done very much by anyone, which is a problem because transitioning to circular business models generally is a major disruption to the status quo. And in the grocery sector specifically, it would be requiring major shifts across supply chains, manufacturer, retailer, and consumer behaviour. And so it's perfectly reasonable that those actors would want to know that making this transition is worth the effort and would want methodologies to be able to track progress against this over time. So for our research project, we really focused on how can we measure the real-world impacts of current existing reusable packaging systems in Aotearoa New Zealand's grocery sector, comparing this to single-use packaging systems across a range of indicators. So we started with a literature review, and in parallel, we also had a kaupapa Māori research study into the relationship between reuse and te ao Māori. Bringing together the findings from these two reviews, we developed 7 indicators across environmental health, socioeconomic, and cultural areas. And then we applied these to real-world examples. So we chose 6 everyday products that are available in single-use and reusable packaging in New Zealand's grocery sector: milk, toothpaste, pumpkin seeds, oats, olive oil, and dishwashing liquid. We followed their packaging through the supply chain from the final point of distribution to the retail shelf, looking at the consumer-facing primary packaging as well as secondary and tertiary packaging. We worked with, interviewed retailers and producers and suppliers across 2 regions, Waikato and Wellington. We completed a customer survey. We did site visits as well as desktop research of business websites. So through completing this exercise, we really learned a lot about the barriers to measuring circularity. We experienced this in terms of measuring reuse impact, but I think a lot of this is extrapolatable to other areas. Firstly, this is really novel research. There weren't a lot of blueprints to follow in this area, nor was there a community of practice to kind of knowledge share. There are some more established ways of measuring impact for recycling. However, this is not really transferable to waste avoidance, reduction and reuse, and sometimes can be quite misleading. Furthermore, we were quite ambitious with our indicators. We had a breadth of impacts and indicators to look at. This really requires multidisciplinary multidisciplinary teams to be able to properly design and apply methods. We had a multidisciplinary team, but we probably could have done with some more economists. Noting what Jay said earlier about not wanting people with fine arts degrees to do everything. Not that any of us had a fine arts degree, and that probably would have helped too for some of those graphs. Anyway, the other barrier we found was very practical in that producers and retailers do not consistently keep or report on the key data points that we needed for our indicators. For example, packaging consumption. Furthermore, a lot of businesses in the grocery sector who are reliant on single-use packaging, quite surprisingly, weren't very enthusiastic to participate to find out how much single-use packaging they were using. So these two factors meant that it was extraordinarily time-consuming to gather our data, and we had to make a lot of assumptions. So I'd love to show you some of the findings we made on two other indicators, but you'll just have to ask me about that if you're interested. And I'll jump straight to some future needs for reusable packaging impact measurement based on how we navigated our barriers. Firstly, it is so important that producers, suppliers, and retailers in New Zealand's grocery sector are required and supported to capture and report on their packaging footprint, on their actual reuse rates if they're using reusable packaging, and their actual recycling rates if they're using single-use packaging. In terms of future research, we really need more robust methods to quantify the food waste impact of different packaging systems, as well as the job creation impacts of different packaging systems. We really need a more in-depth exploration of the human health risks of different packaging materials used in different packaging systems. We really found that it was not on anybody's radar that different packaging materials contain chemicals of concern that are known to transfer into food, and how does reusing or single use amplify or mitigate against that. We'd love to see more life cycle analyses actually compare real-world examples of single-use and reusable packaging systems. And we really need more Māori-led or co-designed with Māori research projects into reusable packaging. So if you'd like to learn more about some of our findings and read our report, you can now check it out on our website, Reuse Aotearoa. So yeah, thank you very much.
Hannah, you don't go away. You've actually got time for a question. Come on back.
I have a question. What was on the other slide?
I'm so glad you asked. So I mentioned we did environmental health and, oh, hello, Graydon. You can help. You can help. No, that would be great. So we had environmental health and socioeconomic, and so one of them was packaging avoided for the environment, and one of them for accessibility, we looked at price comparisons. So for the milk, you can see here, this is the weight of the packaging and the different systems broken down by materials. So these are the single use. So you can see the amount of plastic in orange there. These are all the reuse systems. Almost all of them perform better after just 10 reuses of the bottles, which is a very conservative reuse rate for those systems. We compared milk sold on tap with milk in glass bottles. And this one in glass bottles, the retailer received 10-litre bladders of milk that they then decanted into the glass bottles. So that's why this one has a bigger, that's cardboard, the cardboard impact of shipping those bladders. But so you can see reusable packaging has just an amazing, like even a poorly performing one. But when you do the price comparisons, this is the single-use system, and these are the reuse. So you can see that great packaging waste impact, but not very affordable. And this is not taking into account the deposits that are an upfront price, sometimes the same cost. So even though it's redeemable, if you bring the bottle back, it's an upfront cost. And I'll just show you the pumpkin seeds one, because this is a different reuse system. This is buying from bulk bins, so it requires people to bring their own containers. If they don't bring their own, then nothing's really, well, this is what we track. So these are the refill systems, and these are the single-use systems by grams. So this is number of packages and number of components. So we did it by weight, but we also did it by number of packages for all the products. So these are refill systems where we assumed a 50% BYO rate. So if only 50% of people bring their own containers, you can still see that there's just the amount of packages. You've got almost 400 packages there versus the SAC model. And this is from two retailers who don't give out disposable They only use repurposed glass jars. And so you can see the impact if people bring their own containers. And this is factoring in the packaging to deliver the bulk product to. So, we often hear, oh, well, if I shop at Bin End, does it really make a difference because all the packaging to bring it to the shop? That's why we looked at the supply chain packaging. And yeah, it does make a difference. And again, though, the pricing, it's not quite as bad as with the milk, but you can still see that the reusables are more expensive. But this is partly because the type of product that tends to be in the types of stores that have refill are a premium product. They're New Zealand grown pumpkin seeds as opposed to imported.
So the point we make about reusable systems is they're internalising the costs of end-of-life disposal, right? Whereas single-use is externalised to councils, ratepayers, that kind of thing. So that's why it's not an even playing field, and that's why. And the price comparisons really show that, eh?
Yeah.
One more question, and then we'll.
Sorry.
No, don't go anywhere. Yeah. We've got one more question.
Oh, sorry.
I guess my question is, I just love all the work you're doing, and how do we make sure the data is accurate? For example, in our house, if I do the grocery shopping, I would present very different data than if my husband does it. So, not to throw him under the bus, but it's a bit stressful because if I don't go buy the toothpaste, he'll come home with 4 tubes of toothpaste, so he won't have to remember again for a long time. So I guess, is there anything from a comms perspective that we can do to help people like him come along on the journey? I'm working on it, trust me.
So we did do customer surveys of customers who were shopping in these more zero-wastey stores, overwhelmingly female and quite well off. But, those were the people that responded to the survey as well, so I'm not sure how reliable that is. I think one of the important things is that I think for a lot of people, that barrier of does it really make a difference, though, the effort? And so to be able to present a story where it's yes, look how much difference you make if you bring your own container versus if you always buy. And for the toothpaste, again, the refill by bulk dispenser method had a 0 packaging impact compared to the toothpaste tubes. So I think that is part of the story for some people will be it does make a difference. I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody, but I don't know if you do.
Thank you, Hannah. It's all right. Bear with me. Okay. We are changing focus now to shift to look at the fibre industry. So I'd like to welcome up Bernadette Casey. So I just found my notes. Bernadette is co-founder and chief executive of Usefully, a textile clean tech company driving circular economy innovation in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Over to you, Bernadette.
Kia ora koutou, Bernadette Casey, Takawingwa. Thank you. Yes, so I'm the CE of Usefully, and we're a textile clean tech company. We grew out of the Textile Reuse Program, which was a program funded by New Zealand businesses in the textile sector to co-design the textile circular economy for Aotearoa and then to develop solutions. And initially we trialled textile-to-textile recycling, but we found economically it simply was unfeasible in New Zealand. So then we turned to look at what were the highest value products we could create out of this resource. This image is out of Scottish household waste, and the mustard line down here is textile waste by volume, and then the waste by impact. So you can see there's a real outsized impact to volume. Unlike plastics and other materials, their impact to volume is quite similar, but textiles is really outsized. So for that reason, we're starting to see textiles be regulated around the world. European Union has recently announced all 27 member states have to establish product stewardship schemes or extended producer responsibility schemes. Australia has a scheme setting up now, and next week the Textile Advisory Group, they've commissioned Eunomia to do a piece of research on the cost-benefit analysis of such a scheme for New Zealand, and that research is out next week. So, having trialled textile recycling, we used a technology. We took Air New Zealand's uniforms from their LA base and used a Californian-based textile recycler. But we found that both from an environmental and from an economics perspective, it wouldn't work in New Zealand. So this prompted us to look at textiles not from a product of textiles, but from a resource. And effectively, all your animal fibres, wool, silk, cashmere, etc., are all proteins. All your plant fibres, cotton, linen, hemp, are cellulosic, and then you have your petrochemical mixes of polyester, nylon, etc. And so we looked at them from a resource level and what were the highest value products that we could turn them into. We took a technology set out of Scion, or the Bioeconomy Research Institute, which they developed for timber processing, and we adapted it for textiles. And our first product, you can see on the terrace. So we trialled cotton, polyester and polycotton as fibre replacements into the roading industry, which currently imports fibre from Czech, brings it all the way over here, and it goes into our roads. So Wellington City Council put their hands up and said, we'll trial it. And so as you can see, it's the bottom end of the terrace. This was laid in 2022. We've still got our COVID masks on. And what it has proved, what it demonstrated, there was an improvement in the performance and durability of the road. It reduced what's called the drain down, it's the asphalt draining down, and improved the response to load and to force cohesion. And then it displaces imported product. I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to get it wrong. and of course, diversion of textiles from landfill. So that was our first product. And then we've gone on to develop a range of different products. Actually, that picture on the right at scale doesn't look very pleasing. I just look at that like, oh, that's not so good. Anyway, it looks all right when it's little. So our products now go into we've got 2 roading products, go into adhesives, into mortars, into building products. And interestingly, our highest value product is 5 times more valuable than turning it into textiles. So, I've been in the textile circular economy for a while, and I wrote my first article back in 17 years ago, 2008, and it was a piece for a book called Melting Point by an American marine biologist. Dr. Eric Dorfman was writing a book on climate change, and I was invited to contribute to it. And since then, I've worked solely on textile circular economy projects around the world and in New Zealand. And what I've come to observe is that, and this is a challenge that we're facing, is that this Western view of a closed loop circular economy, I believe, is really constraining our progress in this space. When there's no kind of surprise, or our putting our resources into an open loop, like not back into textiles but into other high value products, was really intentional, because at the time when we were doing the design, Dewey Sharif and a Māori, Professor Tina Bossa Dean, thank you. They had looked at Kay Rayworth's donut economy and then applied a Te Ao Māori perspective to it. And that Māori perspective was as a spiral, and the spiral is something that we see across the globe, across multiple cultures and from time immemorial, like our ancestors were drawing in spirals, etc. And when you look at that image, you can just see the potentiality of a spiral versus a circle. And this is, you know, when we know better, we can do better. And I think rather than talking about a circular economy, I think we need to move to a discussion around a spiral economy and what that would look like. Because at the moment, particularly we've seen it in Europe, this real ideology around textiles have to go back into textiles. But we know that the environmental impacts of that are not great. And we also know that, you know, it's not a scalable system. They've been trying to prove this for over 10 years and with little progress. And so if we change our thinking to what would that spiral of resources look like, where resources are held at their highest value, what would that look like for us? Anyway, that's it. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to say one thing. We're now fully commercial. We've got a plant up in Auckland. We're currently putting machinery into the plant at the moment. And from January, we'll be able to process about 3 tonnes a week of textile waste. So we've gone from concept to testing and proving through to commerciality. And we've got commercial customers like Resine and other building customers. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, Claudia. I think we've got time for one quick question, I think, and then we'll have to move on.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I wondered whether what we are seeing now, in the ways we are comparing the circle and the spiral, that if we change the perspective, the spiral could start to look like the toe tutu. And the escalation that Jay talked about, maybe is that what makes a spiral different from the circle?
Bernadette wasn't here this morning to hear Jay's talk, so
I'm
it's a bit
sorry.
tricky,
But
I
this
think,
is then a
to
question
respond.
for the audience here, to try and think about perspective, and in which dimension would that perspective start to shift? Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. I think we might move on just so we've got time for other speakers. But very cool news about the plant happening in Auckland. Very exciting. So I'd like to welcome up next Tessa Bradley. Tessa is Head of Product and Sustainability at Koto, a New Zealand fashion-based brand known for its commitment to ethical and sustainable practices. Tessa, over to you. There we go.
I have to apologise, my slides are not as exciting as everyone else's. I don't have fancy graphs and things, but hey. Kia ora, thank you for having me. My name's Tessa. I've been at Koto for 9.5 years, but working in the sustainability space for the last 4 years, so it's all a very fresh place for me, but I'll do my best to be informative. So yes, we are Koto. We were founded in 2006. We are a fair trade organic cotton clothing brand based in New Zealand, and we manufacture in India. I thought I'd start with this quote, which I think really sums up the ethos of Koto, and that is that there are 2 reasons why Koto was born. One was to ensure fashion could be made in a humane, ethical and kind way, and the other to work with nature and not against it. At Koto, our biggest circular success has been designing for longevity and recovery from the inception of each of the designs. So Koto garments have always been made from certified 100% fair trade organic cotton. But after years of research and testing, we've managed to replace conventional trims with natural and biodegradable alternatives. So the industry norm is usually a synthetic component, so polyester threads, polyester buttons, metal zips, all things that are really hard to repair or obviously break down. So in 2024, we launched our first ever plastic-free collection and measured the volume of the trims and components we were... Oh, did I just skip 2? Yep. We measured the volume of the trims and components, and we were replaced from that season. And this ensures that our garments can safely return to nature at the end of use. 4 years ago, we launched our Take Back program as a resource stream for koto garments that can't be repaired and have reached the end of their usable life. As part of our sorting process, we remove any trims, either for reuse as part of our repair program or return to suppliers to recycle them into new trims. As part of our, we launched our repair program in 2018. Each garment is assessed by a customer care team and is deemed repairable and worked on by our skilled repair partners in our New Zealand workroom or with our repair partners in Australia. We provide a comprehensive care guide on our website to show customers how to carefully and mindfully care and clean their koto garments to extend the life of their clothing. Koto Relove adds a fresh purpose to pre-loved koto garments that deserve more wear, and Relove is part of the koto journey to become a fully circular business. One of the best things that we can do for our planet is to keep our garments in use for longer, so we want to give our community an opportunity to pass on clothes that they no longer wear but still have a lot of love to give. Together, these steps are closing the loop for design, use, recovery, proving that circularity starts at the design table and not at the end life. The barriers. Material innovation gaps. There's still limited technology for true fibre-to-fibre recycling of natural fibres at commercial scale, especially being based down in New Zealand. We found that when we looked at other parts of the globe that do textile-to-textile recycling. The feedstock tonnage, MOQ, minimum quantities, were way too high. We have a humble 1 tonne of textile waste that we've collected over the last 7 years, but we don't kind of look at it as a waste anymore. We are looking at it as a resource, and we're starting to do some innovative things with that resource at the moment to be able to potentially return it back to the earth. Traceability and data gaps. Although we collect data from our suppliers, there's no unified method to measure the circular flows, materials, water, energy, and across the entire fashion supply chain. Infrastructure mismatch. New Zealand has limited local textile recycling or composting infrastructure, meaning even circular materials often end up in landfill. Economic barriers. The cost of small batch circular innovation like repair and resale is high compared to producing new garments at scale, and it puts many brands off. Cultural behaviour. So the fast fashion habits still dominate. Circularity needs both system and consumer change. Durability and care must be revalued, and repair should be part of education. So research. So we need shared metrics to measure circularity beyond waste diversion, ones that capture material retention, product life cycle, and regeneration. We need to develop standard indicators for the circular textiles, for example, percentage of materials recaptured and garments resold, and what value does that add to the product. The next generation are already starting to think about what is the resale value of that garment before they even purchase it. We need to map the textile material flows in Aotearoa to quantify where garments actually go after use, measure carbon and water impacts of circular models versus linear ones to demonstrate tangible environmental gains, and explore consumer participation models, what motivates take back and repair engagement in small markets like New Zealand, and what technology is required to support that. Research that helps us connect design decisions with measurable circular outcomes would inform businesses to change their models and ultimately change consumer behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I reckon we've got time for 3 questions. Ooh. So, yes, over here.
Really great talk. Oh, can you hear me? Really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could talk about affordability for consumers, as I know that can be a bit of a barrier to engaging in sustainable fashion.
Yeah. I mean, for us, being a sustainable brand it comes with a lot of costs. There is increasing costs, especially around certification. So we are Fair Trade certified, we're Global Organic Textile Standards certified, we're B Corp certified, we're also Living Wage accredited. So our base costs are super expensive, but that's why we try to bring in, well, we have brought in our Relove program. So that was a true sort of accessibility piece for people that might not be able to afford our full price items. But yeah, also I think producing offshore has also helped with keeping our costs down as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Tessa. That was great. I just wondered about how you actually engage with consumers around the use life of garments. Like you've got a repair dimension there, but also about washing garments. Is there much of a kind of service relation in that use life where you actually get people to think about extending that use life?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, we use our social media platforms a lot to communicate with our customers around longevity and durability of their garments. But we also have a collective program, which is it's a loyalty program where we actually incentivize customers to repair their own garments or use our repair program as well. So you can actually learn how to repair a garment and then you earn points to then spend on some more Koto garments. Yeah, or repair services, yeah.
And what about the seasonality of your aesthetics? I mean, is there a great turnover in that respect? Because we know about the sort of micro seasons of fast fashion.
Yeah.
How do you handle that aesthetic?
Yeah, we have had over the years we've had some flux. So we always were Fair Trade organic cotton, and then we found that we wanted to branch out into the northern hemispheres, and obviously it gets very, very cold up in the northern hemisphere. So we sort of started branching out into it's called ZQ Merino, which is regenerative merino from New Zealand, to offer sort of some more warmth to that market. And then we got into recycled nylon swimwear so that we were appealing to the resort customer. But then what we found pre-COVID, that it wasn't like we had a really robust supply chain, but it was kind of muddying the water. And we have this ultimate goal of wanting to be able to return our clothing back to the earth, and we obviously weren't going to be able to do that with having a recycled nylon swimwear in the range. So we actually stripped that all back, and we actually cancelled one of our best-selling items, which was a cotton elastane legging, because of the difficulties around separating the elastane out of the cotton. So we tried to, I guess, to answer your question, cater to all of those customers and the different seasonalities and stuff, but we actually found that we just didn't want to do that in the end.
I was actually thinking more about fashion seasons and making an intervention there rather than thermal seasons.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if only we could do that. The fashion calendar is very hard to break, especially if you are trying to work with a wholesale model like we are. Actually, we probably, if we just stopped doing wholesale, we could probably do whatever we want. But wholesalers purchase at a very certain time of year because they have budgets and they want to spend that across different brands. So the fashion model is extremely hard to break, especially if you're tied to a wholesale model, I think. But we are very slow. It takes us 18 months from design inception through to the very first launch of our collections, but we do still do. We don't even call it winter and summer, but winter and summer ranges, yeah.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I think we'll move on to the next speaker. So I'd like to welcome Adrian Whitewood. Adrian is a fashion designer and creative director whose work draws deeply from Māori culture, Māori art and traditional concepts. Welcome. Just some instructions there, George.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko ai au, ki te tau tōku pāpā no rongo whakāta me Ngāti Kahungunu ahau, ki te tau tōku māmā no Ngā Puhi me Ngai Tai ahau. I tipu ake au ki Rotorua, toko whāku tamariki, ko taku tino mahi, ko ngā mahi kākahu toi tū, ngā mahi kākahu toi. So yeah, my favourite mahi in life is fashion. My kuia, she taught me how to sew at the age of 8, and it's just been a lifelong passion of mine. And he mihi nui ki ngā pau o tēnei kaupapa. It's just been awesome to hear all these speakers, and I've gotten such rich information from everybody here. So thank you so much for having me. My kaupapa today is about a project that I've been working on for a while. My passion is Māori design, Indigenous Māori art. And what I like to say is my kakahu is for a forever piece. But I had a challenge of, well, what does that really mean in terms of ancestral knowledge? So I've been working on a kaupapa which is called Kākahu Toi Tū. Whatu ngaro te tangata, Toi Tū te whenua, as people disappear from sight, the land remains. My ethos is all about creating an emotional connection to Indigenous design. So I grew up as a tour guide in Rotorua, and many times I heard stories that our different kapa would tell the tourists about how our ancestors used to sleep, and hauora and rongoa Māori was very much part of our life. So that's Māori medicine and Māori wisdom in terms of our natural medicine. So every night I would hear this, that our ancestors slept on beds of kawakawa. Kawakawa is a healing plant used for medicinal purposes in Māori medicine. And for me, I really romanticised that idea that our ancestors were so close to nature that we lived and breathed medicine. And I wondered, how could I take this information and transfer it into kākahu? So that has been my journey. I took a proposal to Scion, which was many years ago now, and I wanted to create a truly, now I've learned a new word, spiral, kaupapa to them about creating a fibre that is made in Aotearoa, is processed in Aotearoa, and also is getting rid of the pests. So this is a fabric that has been around for a long time. It's merino and possum. We call it perino here in New Zealand. And it's basically using merino, which is from our sheep, and also utilising a pest here, which is our possum. So I've worked with them for many years, New Zealand, Natco in Auckland. But then I had this idea of, well, how can I put this concept into fabric of Māori medicine into fabric. Arohamai, that is the concept. So I took that to Scion, and we've been working on that for a few years. The process that we're currently working on, and I'm not a scientist, so this is my understanding of it, is we are using a tannin process to try and, well, my idea at first was, how can I encapsulate rongoa into fabric? I know they do it in the UK, they do micro-encapsulation with lavender. And I know Karen Walker here, who's a New Zealand designer, she's also used rose, and she's put that into socks. So my whole kaupapa was, putting rongoa Māori into fibre. We've done this, and we've been testing it at the moment using a tannin process, using Indaria. If anyone is familiar with Indaria, it's a invasive species of seaweed, come from China. And there are some Māori agro businesses who are using this as fertiliser. We're currently looking at how we can use it as a tanning process to apply our rongoa into our fibre. So that is what I am currently working on, and also why I am here. Some of the challenges that we've come up with is just, money, really. I didn't realise when I was going to sign with this idea how much it would cost. I think they've self-funded it, but it was $100,000 just to test the first concept. So we don't even have the proof of concept yet. Another barrier has been, the length of time it's taken. And also, one thing that I've noticed from trying to apply for funding is obviously when the government changes, they just wipe away our funding. But also something interesting that I came up against was it was a type of funding. I think it was He Aka Katoro. Well, the barrier to entry there was based on first in, first serve. So if you're somebody like me who's never done proposals fast enough, it was just whoever could get into that proposal. So I wonder how could they measure that in terms of quality? It was basically whoever came in first got that funding. And I think the funding, I'm not too sure whether it was something like 7 million to 30 million. So you imagine the amount of quality, like who did they get? It'd be interesting to see, because that portal closed quite quickly. Another thing is, high cost of production in New Zealand, and I really love this idea that I've come up with, but I guess that's why I'm here. I'm trying to think of ways where it's not just a novelty, it can be used in, whether it's liners at the marae, filler on the insides of mattresses. It's basically creating antimicrobial fibre through rongoa Māori. So that is my passion at the moment, and I just love to hear, and I have already, so thank you so much to people who've given me cards and just information on where to, because I would love to share ancestral knowledge through fibre and how that can go into the commercial world. That's really a passion of mine. So thank you for having me. I hope I have gotten through everything. That was it. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa.
Thank you, Adrian. We've got time for 2 to 3 questions for Adrian. Is anyone? Yeah.
I shall apologise in advance. This is the accountant speaking. Have you assessed product market fit for this product to determine which distribution pathways are most effective to actually commercialise, so that you can access that funding more effectively with that knowledge to hand?
Yeah, and I guess again that is just through trying to secure funding. So we want to get, what I've said on the screen, putia for research and design, but it's just trying to get that funding to do that research, because that's where we're at the moment. It's trying to secure funding. So if anybody knows of any ways, I'd be so grateful. Yeah.
What's the trial showing so far? Like how's?
So obviously, if you had seen the slides, I've forgotten her name. She showed the different proteins and chemicals of the fibre. Well, what we're finding with the possum merino is, because if you're familiar with possum, it has a hole in the centre, and I think it's not taking well to the tannins. So we're now trialling merino 100% and seeing how that goes, because at the moment, we've basically spent 100,000 and it's not worked. So hopefully with this next round, we'll get there.
Have you looked at other wool breeds, other than New Zealand merino? Because as an option that are not more costs.
That's a good question. I'm only limited to the manufacturers I work with as well, and New Zealand, as anybody will know, is so small in terms of, I think there's only Y Yarns I know that does the yarn here. There's literally only one company I think who still spins yarn in New Zealand. So again, the manufacturers here are only limited to whatever they've got available. So merino is the only truly spiral product I think we have in New Zealand, and whatever merino they're bringing out. So but that is a good question.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Yes.
Previously, we've received funding from the British wool industry, and they are, and this sounds a bit terrible coming from New Zealand, but they do fund a wide range of projects, and they might actually assist you with getting market distribution outside of New Zealand. But just a thought.
Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Adrian. Ko Angela Kilford tōku ingoa. It's nice to hear from you today. And yeah, I've bought many gifts from your store. Thank you. I've got a really geeky kind of question about the rongoā properties from the seaweed and what you're trying to achieve by going through that tannin process with the fibre. Like, is there coloration there as well, or is it just imbuing it with other properties for wellness?
Yes, that's again another question that I actually probably didn't cover, is what we are currently working with is the antimicrobial properties of harakeke. Yeah, and we're using Undaria as the tannin to apply that. That is the only rongoā Māori we have used so far, because we're restricted in terms of what we can test because of the financial side. But so far we are currently just using harakeke, because if anybody knows, harakeke is flax, so it relates to fibre and wearable kakahu as well. So yeah, is that what you were?
Yeah, thank you for answering. And I get that you're layering the modi onto your fibre, which is really cool. And we'll give you, we haven't got a card. We'll talk later on the, yeah, cool. And maybe we want to try and get you some money somehow too. Okay.
Oh, yay!
Thank you so much.
Cool. Let's give Adrian a round of applause. So we have an exciting last speaker who is not on the list, but has appeared. So I would like to welcome up Kelly McLean. Kelly is an independent contractor and researcher who has been working on MB's bioeconomy workstream and recently, as part of a recently announced project, the Common Ground Future of Fibre Aotearoa pilot. So Kelly, do you want to come up? There's no slides, but Kelly's just got a riff for us. Welcome.
Kia ora, I'm Kelly. Yes, so I've got a bit of riffing. So I think by way of background, and thank you, I think that was pretty good. So there's two projects I'd like to just quickly touch on, but there's probably four things if I can sort of get that in your mind after this 5 minutes. So I've got a pretty diverse background. I'm from Massey originally, so textiles is what I studied, not fine arts, but I have ended up getting into sustainability and measurement over the past 12 years through life cycle assessment, and then later on through sustainability projects that have been quite complex. So the kinds of sectors I've worked in have been the film industry, fast-moving consumer goods, packaging, textiles, manufacturing, built environment, and then more recently policy. And where I really love to understand a bit more is around that consumer and business kind of change piece. So I'm sort of one of those people that sit between different fields, and I'm a connector or like a bridge sometimes between different ideas, because you can kind of bring experience from other sectors into new spaces, and they have a whole different impact. So I just wanted to spotlight a few things. So sometimes people are like, oh, what is the government doing on circular economy? Well, there was an amazing work program that was led by their strategy team that was around building their circular economy strategy. And all of that amazing sort of reports and research is actually available online now. So even though they discontinued doing that work about 2 years ago, you can actually find some of the reports that they were working on up to that point. And one particular project that I worked on and led was the manufacturing piece. So one thing that was amazing through that process was the importance of place. So what we could see when we were mapping out where all the different manufacturing activities were happening in the motu were clusters of activities happening in different parts. And so from a circular economy perspective, it's really, really important to understand those materials and flows that are coming through the different activities. And we started to see that actually, yes, place does matter. And what we looked at was potentially what kinds of waste streams were coming out of those activities. and then also the types of emissions and levels of emissions potentially as well, and energy requirements. So that was at a national level, but I think just a takeaway from that is the importance of place. It's all available online. Another thing I wanted to flag was this idea of circular economy and creativity, being able to come together through different opportunities, and how important it is to collaborate. So earlier in the year when I was working on a project with the ACT government over in Canberra, we looked at the establishment of a textile hub in place. And the people that we had in the room were community groups that were creating crafts and art from textiles, but recyclers, we had designers, and we had all the logistics people sort of in one place trying to solve this challenge. And so what that kind of taught me was like, it's incredibly amazing being able to work through that whole value chain and its complexity, and being able to actually get that consensus around what waste might actually mean, because what came out of that was actually that we needed to value our textiles more. And so some of the conversations shifted. And then just finally, future of fibre Aotearoa. So AgMart's just announced about a week ago, so you can go onto the Common Ground website, and there's a bit of a sort of overview of the program. But it's a 2-year piece of work that will be a community of action, being able to explore what the fibre ecosystem in New Zealand is doing right now, where it can go, recognising that food and fibre is very different. So you've got on one hand a consumer product that's sort of going through quite a short life cycle, and then with fibre, it's a very durable life cycle. It's longer. Design's incredibly important in the product that comes out of it. And the R&D is very different as well. So wanting to be able to, I'll use that word, bridge again, bridge, connect, wool, harakeke, hemp, mycelium, fermented fibres that's sort of in the lab. We think that there's a really amazing story to be told in that space, and wouldn't it be nice if circular and regenerative practices were embedded right at the foundation of those conversations and not just a side project. So that's what that's all about. The first year is around foundational mapping, ecosystem understanding, being able to go and say, hey, look, this is what we've found, this is how big the sector is, this is some opportunities. I have no doubt that circular opportunities will be part of that story. And then the second year is around pilots and turning that stuff into action. And the way that we would win for that particular project is if industry and academia and researchers can come together and progress things that they've been wanting to do for a while, but maybe haven't had those opportunities to meet. So I just think, I guess my research question is, how can we work better together? How can we not be competitive, or like, what does the pre-competitive space look like? How can we actually move New Zealand Inc. across as well? And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, we have time for 1 to 2 questions, depending on how long they are. Anyone got anything? This is prompted. Kelly? No, nothing? People are thinking about afternoon tea? Yes.
Have you got any ideas so far on how we dial down the competitiveness and work together?
So far, it's been actually removing that funding piece that was sort of discussed. Yeah, so like when people kind of know, hey, look, this is the expectations of like a third space, almost like that. You're walking into a cafe, you can kind of meet, oh, actually, this is kind of like a third space. You know, it's okay to meet people and have those conversations, rather than transacting, sort of like, they're meeting me just so they can get some kind of thing across the line. And what I've found is that when you start to talk and open up those conversations, you find out what people are doing, and then all of a sudden you see over here, oh, they're looking for that thing, they need to talk. But otherwise, sometimes people are quite suspicious, so trust is a really big part. Yeah, and we've been able to sort of get people on board from across the whole value chain, which has been incredible. And it's been quite a big process over the last 3 to 4 months to sort of get that going. Yeah. But talking, being able to meet. Yeah.
And someone who has the relational skills to broker that, right?
The
Like
brokers,
yourself.
well, you've got to be positive as well, because actually there's a lot of negativity in the space, but I just see all the opportunities because so many people doing amazing things, but they don't know about it, and there's not really a forum to share it. So, yeah, I think at the very least in the next year, people will know more about what's happening.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
We're about to break for afternoon tea, but I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers. It's been really fascinating. Thank you for taking on the challenge of 5 to 8 minutes. It's a real hard time length. And thank you so much for just coming and joining us today. I've really appreciated it, and I'm sure others in the room have as well. So after 3, we've got afternoon tea till 3:30, and then 3:30 we're back in here for a final panel discussion. So head off and then have a cuppa.
Okay, if everyone could take a seat, please. We'll get started. Okay, kia ora, everyone. If everyone takes a seat, we'll get started. Okay, if everyone takes a seat, we'll get started. It's not on? It is? Okay.
Oh, you're going to have it real close, this one.
This one?
Yeah, it's a bit loud.
It's coming up there. Okay, everyone, if we take a seat, we'll get started. Thank you all. It's really hard to get people sort of focused and concentrating again after afternoon tea, but we're going to liven things up. For those of you who don't know me, and I've managed to talk to most of you today, my name's Nitha Palakshapa, so I've been sort of second half of the project lead on this project with Kelly and the rest of the project team. And it's sort of it's great to be at this point, you know, towards the end of the day, where we've had a fantastic sort of run-up of speakers, you know, people looking at the food and fibre issues very broadly, but also people who have really given us a focus of what's happened in their organisations and their specific industry. So I think it's been brought together really well. And I think what we'd like to do now in this session is go out broad again. What I'm going to do is start by asking our 3 speakers. So we've got Jay, who started us off, and we've got Stephen, and we've got Kelly, who are all going to give us about 5 minutes of reflection on their thoughts, what we've achieved today, and bearing in mind that what our own brief started with was looking at what's next for measuring circular economy in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So we're sort of going full circle, and I sort of don't like to use that anymore. I want to use spiral, I want to use tornado, all these other things that have sort of popped up seem so much more powerful, really. So let's see what our 3 speakers have to say very briefly, and then we're going to open it up for everyone to sort of make comments, ask questions. We want to encourage a bit more discussion on sort of your own perhaps perspective on barriers, challenges in terms of measuring circular economy. Jay.
Ooh, where to start? I'm not one of these organised people who wrote notes, so I'm going to start real broad. I think, the idea of a circular economy for me is just the root of all tribal thinking in New Zealand, and I will speak from a Te Ao Māori perspective of interrelationships, of whakapapa, that everything is connected to everything else. I guess you can draw that as a circle or a web. I remember I saw a Buddhist illustration of it once as a spider web with dewdrops where every drop reflected every other dewdrop. And I think, a circle might be a bit simple. I think it's far more complex than a circle. And that's always been the measurement challenge. I remember early in sustainability where we thought, right, let's connect up all the different indicator frameworks so we can measure just with one set of indicators and report to every framework in the world. And that was a brilliant idea until we tried to do it and realized that there is just so many interconnections that you can only ever approximate a measurement. You can never actually measure sustainability. You can measure trends on a single metric, but you can't claim anything really beyond that. So yeah, I think, and thinking about a circular economy, it's helpful to think about interrelationships between things. Going back to one of my favorites, Alan Watts again, he said, you don't walk by dangling your feet in the air. It's always an interaction between you and something. You can't know left without right. Like everything is interaction and relationship. In economics, when economics first tried to address sustainability, they came up with the idea of the capitals approach. And the capitals approach initially, which is now known as weak sustainability, had that idea that any capital can be substituted for any other capital. So you can take natural capital, you can take a forest, you can cut that down, you can process it, turn it into financial and produce capital, and it balances. And obviously that was pretty wrong because it doesn't regenerate in the speed that would require. So yeah, I think, my idea in the circular economy space is that anything where we try to draw a diagram and we try to reduce things to a simple image of how a system works, it's wrong, and it may be helpful, but it's wrong. And so, it's always for me been about not being too fundamentalist, accepting the gooey wiggliness of systems and to work within them. I think the hardest transition for me coming out of academia and into consulting was being okay with not working to a gold standard when reporting information, to say, this is good enough. It's not perfect, but it helps get the point across. It helps progress things. A lot of what held us up on the New Zealand Sustainability Dashboard is that we wanted the gold standard, and because we couldn't get that, we achieved nothing because an incremental improvement wasn't seen as good enough. So, yeah, there's a very broad ramble on.
I think we'd probably agree with you, especially in the last part. Sometimes when you want change, you're trying to look for the large change or the ultimate goal. And even in academia, that's becoming an impossibility. We're looking at incremental change, even in terms of the research that we're sort of shifting out into industry. So totally agree with you there. And I think picking up on the relationships, I think, was really important as well. Thank you. Stephen?
Thanks very much. I feel like I want to pick up on some things that Jay emphasized in his talk about why measure in the first place, and what emerged for me, particularly that slide of the finger pointing at the moon, is that it's a pragmatic or practical exercise. It's not the end or value in itself. It's pointing to what is valuable. And I guess I want to connect that to what I heard across all the talks about the food and fiber. And one theme that seemed to run through it, unsurprisingly, was money, and specifically capitalization, and how do we make things happen. And so the practical aim of measurement then is in part to give you credibility, saying, look, this could work, right? And that's broadly construed sort of the concept of social license. And I guess for me, that got me thinking about, well, who's investing into what end? So if we wanted to, say, relocalize food and fiber production in this society, where would the capital come from? And that makes me think about history, and in particular, a book called Cooperative Enterprise and Comparative Perspective by a guy named Jason Spicer, who's a big thinker in the social and solidarity economy space. The book was sort of a mystery as a history, and the mystery was, why have co-ops not taken off in my home country of the United States? And there's all kinds of reasons, mostly having to do with politics and the Pinkertons and repression and violence and all that kind of stuff. But what he compared it to was he compared it to Finland, where cooperatives are a big part of the economy, and Scandinavia more broadly. He looked at France, where they have a long history of the social and solidarity economy that goes back centuries. And then the third country he looked at was, oh yeah, New Zealand. That's right, which on a per capita basis had more co-ops than anywhere else. And a lot of that was actually a function of geography, that kind of, again, mutuality at the point of finance is a part of the history. So I just wonder if there's a way in which that history could be returned to or reinvented. Is there a kind of Trans-Tasman version of cooperation amongst cooperatives that might allow us to really think about how could we capitalize research? How could we solve that problem of using tannins to color things, or the possum example that was just so intriguing for me, partially because I didn't understand it all that much, but I could see that it was sort of trying to line up multiple values, and it would be worth investing in. Wouldn't it be great if there was a vehicle for doing that? That's one thought that I had. And then I guess the other thought I had was that there are things that are being unmade, both here in New Zealand and in Australia, and it's the university sector I'm thinking of in particular. So several of us have read this article recently, which was, the title of it is Repurposing the University in Times of Climate Breakdown, by a First Nations thinker from Brazil named Vanessa Andrade. And essentially what she's saying is that the university sector is falling apart, but as it falls over, it might function like what she called a nurse log, which is a metaphor from tropical countries, where as that institution breaks down, all of the nutrients in it sort of go off and seed into other entities and organizational form. So this is a long-winded way of saying, and I'm thinking of several of my colleagues here who are really taking serious this idea of what if we form partnerships between academic research and local enterprise, or different kinds of commercialization, including cooperatives. Could we reinvent that partnership model? What would that look like? How could we share revenues? How could we basically transition the university into something else, in which case it becomes a nurse log? And then lastly, just one more point, if I got the time. Is it okay? I was thinking about the thing about food security. I can't quite remember who was presenting on it. Local food production. Can anyone help me out? Emily, yeah. And sort of the question of broccoli. What was coming to mind for me... Broccoli, yes. Well, what was coming to mind for me was, this is going back a ways, the city of Belo Horizonte in Brazil. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this example, but it was an attempt by the local municipality to essentially wholly subsidize the production of nutritious food for the local community. So that idea of sort of relocalization with an aim towards decommodification underwrites the livelihood for the farmers and deals with the problem of food insecurity in the local community. And I guess I'm just thinking of it because I just sat through a whole heap of student presentations in Australia about different regions in New South Wales. And the threat assessment coming from the state government is that food insecurity, along with housing insecurity, is in every part of Australia at this point. So I mean, for me, it's a live question. And as you know, some of those other contradictions we were seeing get more pronounced, I think it's going to be one that we're going to have to solve on a local level. The inevitability of degrowth that our first speaker referred to. Anyways, that's enough from me. Here you go.
Thank you. Kelly?
I thought you were just going to say everything that I wanted to say and steal my notes, but you started. But I also have some extra things. But it is echoing what Stephen said. But yeah, I guess reflecting on the theme of measuring circular economy or spiral economy or taututu, you know, I was thinking there's kind of two
two themes of measuring that have come through. One is the measuring as a language, or as a way of communicating, mainly externally. What you already know is great, you know. And then the other one is this sort of internal tracking of data, like partly what Jacob was talking about, and some other people have mentioned, you know, how we don't have data on this, or we've weighed everything on this, or we've tracked, you know, a lot of different textiles. You know, the use of internal measuring that's for your own learning. And then Jay's reflection on how there's the one technical report and the multiple reports that come out of it. I like that approach because there is something behind it, the technical report, and then it is about the communication. But sometimes I worry what happens is that it's the lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? That we start to use measurement as a way of propaganda, as Jacob talked about, as a way of kind of convincing ourselves that we're doing something even when it's not enough. So I kind of was reflecting on, you know, honest measurement, and although it's never going to be the full picture, it's always just pointing at the moon, like how can we hold it with sort of honesty and humility and not fudge it, but also recognise its limitations. It's a language and a tool, and then it's also an internal tracking thing to help us learn and reflect on our own practices and our own decisions as a business or as a university or as a community enterprise. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about measurement. And then in terms of what next, I had 3 points. One, it was so great to listen to the research needs and the research ideas that the industry speakers have brought up. And I was thinking about, the university as well, as a site of potentially escalating networks of reciprocity and care, and how, the falling over of the tree can nurse many other things. But also just, you know, this is what we're funded for. This is why universities are partly government funded. It's because it is our job, as Abby said today, to take some of that risk, to do some of the testing, to do the experiment in a, out of curiosity and a desire to learn, and to share that back with the country who funds us. And so I think, sometimes we lose track of that. We're like, oh, students need a degree, they should pay for it. Or, we should get more research consulting contracts and deliver things for external partners. But also, one of the benefits of having, regular funding is that ability to absorb, some of the risk and to be a site of experimentation and learning. So my second thought about that, and there's a few people in the room that have helped me think about this, is we've put in an early notification for a Masters of Circular Economies run through Massey University. And one of the things I'm really excited about, it's proposed to be transdisciplinary between sort of economic geography and business, a policy and society stream, Sarah here in the life cycle analysis and engineering, and Faith and Angela in circular design, that students could pick these specialisations but also have to take a course from one of the other specialisations, so they learn about the connections between life cycle analysis and economic policy, for example. And the design that we went with in the proposal is to have, rather than a thesis, have a practicum, where the students take what they've learned and work in a community organisation or a business or a government, local government or something, to kind of do some of those things that you've identified as research needs. Because the other difficulty for us is that, if we apply for funding to do research, we have to show how it's new and it's interesting and it's more than what anyone else has ever done before and it's going to be the best thing ever. But actually some of the research needs are quite basic. It's collecting data. It's not a new method. It's not a new thing. And, we can't get competitive research funding to just do something basic. It has to be new and exciting. But students can do that. And that's how they learn. And that's an excellent way for students to learn, is to answer some of those basic research questions with and for community groups. So I was thinking a little bit along the same lines as you, that like, what are the ways that universities can participate in transition that are not just writing journal articles and critiquing what other people are doing. Yeah, that's where I was thinking. And then the last thought was this idea that we've been circling around for a few years, some of us, of a circular economy return on investment as a way of helping. We're not sure what it should be. Should it be for helping businesses make decisions about where to invest their own kind of surplus from with it that they've generated within the business? What would help? What would have the most impact in terms of circularity? Or should it be something that communicates externally to show here's what our circular economy return on investment is, so you should invest in us? So that's kind of what I'm playing with at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. I think just summarising a lot of what's been said, there are aspects that we need to consider in terms of collaboration, how we collaborate, who we collaborate with, and trying to sustain those collaborations to a point where you actually sort of get to wherever that finger is pointing. You know, you might not get to the moon, but get as far as you can in terms of moving things forward. And I think from my own perspective, if we want to create shifts, it's going to require collaboration, holistic thinking, you know, from a multidisciplinary perspective, and a lot of people sitting around the table. And I guess that's sort of part of what we've been trying to work towards, and hopefully we'll sort of continue to work in that way. So I guess we've got time now for a few questions, or if you want to get up and make a comment, your own reflection on the day, or how you see it impacting your own work or your own business, feel free. Any questions for any of the panel or anyone else? Now's the time to speak up.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to just kind of look at that term circular economy a bit. And when you look at what's happened under the kind of heading of circular economy, and if you say it to someone, what they tend to do is jump to the word recycling. So we look at all the waste being generated, what can we do with it? But actually, if you look at it using an environmental sustainability lens, actually what we need to be doing is going back to the initial extraction and use of resources to meet people's needs and wants, and addressing that. Because if you only focus on the end of the life cycle, then you can carry on producing more and more up front. And people don't talk about that, but that's the really difficult bit to address, because it means these extractive industries are going to shrink, ideally. Yeah, it's about terminology and what you choose to measure, right? Yeah. And I think we need to put a lot more emphasis on the kind of underlying drivers that determine where we should be measuring, at the end of the life or at the beginning of the life.
Yep. Okay. So that takes us right from production through to consumption. And I think consumption itself creates so many issues, you know, I think today some people talked about changing consumer behaviour, and that's one of the things, even as a basic consumer, I might think it's all about recycling, but it's so much more than that. And trying to expand mindset is a huge issue that we have to deal with as well at that point. Do you have any comments on what Sarah, right? Sarah's brought up. Can you share this?
All right. If all you've got is a dump truck, then everything looks like a payload, right? So I know, that problem of what to measure and when to measure it. So that in that measuring the value of reuse project I spoke about at the beginning of the day, we were trying to imbue that sector, sort of extending product life cycle with all of its carbon implications and other implications. That's something else that we can produce a whole new range of measures for, that then end up, I think, in a sense, really validating that as something that's more important than recycling in terms of achieving circularity. The question I think you're talking about, which is at the point of extraction and production, that's something that Nina Gabor talks a lot about from the Australia Institute, where she's really trying to challenge fast fashion's hegemony. And for me, one of the things that's really interesting about her work is she's trying to change the regime of desire that surrounds clothing to make reuse into something that becomes storied and celebratory and meaningful. And she does it through holding parties. So like, I'm wondering, or like I'm just being provocative here, but what role might pleasure be what role might pleasure play in changing the way we relate to consumption, and what else can we do that might be pleasurable? So alternative hedonics is another term for it.
Or not just pleasure, but also other imbued meanings. So I'm thinking of what Adrian said about designing the kākahu toitu, the forever cloak. And, you know, a kākahu that's handed down for a long time is definitely more desirable than one you got from a tourist shop, you know. Like the meaning accumulates, right? The value accumulates over time. And yeah, and what Koto is doing, and I don't know where Tessa is, but you know, that trying to think about those pieces as things that are desirable, but also they accumulate meaning and stories. Yeah, I think it really shows the connections between trying to do all of the science work that people are doing here, and then all of the the embodied habits and social science stuff that's part of that. So yeah, interesting.
I just had a comment around the value of unpaid labour and volunteers, and I had an amazing conversation, I'm not sure where she is, around just the time it takes to actually get textiles, as an example, back out to be reused when they're damaged or, you know, destined for landfill, essentially, when they're donated. And just that grassroots stuff that doesn't end up being measured. Like, we all know that clothes swaps happened, but no, it's not going to end up somewhere being measured as a way that people have reduced their consumption. I was part of organising a pop-up for our local community in Pukerua Bay, and there was a clothes swap that was very well attended. I don't know how much transacted, and then it was like, if anything left was donated to the local charity shop. But it's like those things are not regularly picked up on unless, like, academics, I have to say, are probably writing about it. So maybe there's a call there to make some of these things more visible.
Stephen, do you want to comment on some of the research that you've
Yeah, well, I guess I'd refer you to my colleague Jenna Condi and Alison Gill, who just organized a swap on our campus with 40,000 students. Not all of them showed up for the swap, by the way, but what we did was we weighed the material as it went in. We had a whole host of other kinds of reuse and repair activities that, again, about changing the regime of desire. And then the other thing that they did was they had these sort of giant swing tags, and people would write in neon markers like, this is why I donated this garment, and here's its history, much like you were saying. And then the person on the flip side would write, here's what it meant for me to get it, including like, I needed professional clothing, I now have it. So for me, it's solving another problem at the university, which is that students don't show up anymore, and it's driving me nuts. So on some level, again, think nurse log. Can we take these massive spaces and really turn them into areas of connection, not just with students, but with the broader community? And then to me, like, the measurement can follow from that, but in a sense, there's another thing happening, which is a demonstration of what it's like to build relationships, and we've got a lot to learn from there.
I was going to add, thank you, I was going to add to, is it Sarah's comment about that recycling and how it makes the wheel tune faster. And this is something we've talked about a lot. And Hannah, I don't know if she's still here, introduced us to the concept of that Jevons paradox, where, when the system becomes more efficient, it spins faster. And the comment about the emotional connectivity to what you wear is really, really valid. But there's this whole other side of the textile sector that isn't our clothing, that's like, you're not going to get emotionally connected to the hospital sheets that you're lying on, or the curtains in the hotel or whatever. And so there's there are different cycles through that textile sector, and we're so aware of clothing because that's what we immediately interact with every day, and that's where all the activism, but there's actually through the commercial sector, the hotels, retirement homes, hospitals, there's this massive flow of resources through that has a different cadence and a different purpose. And anyway, that's what I want to raise.
Now,
He's just holding the
mic.
Just hoping Jay will grab it. I'll take it off. I'll carry the load.
This has been great. I guess I've got two questions. One is around, it's great to measure things, but when I look at like why I sit in rooms like this, it's because I want my great-grandchildren to be able to swim in the ocean. And so like question one is kind of, how do we make sure we have the measurement and data right, but we also help people think about the world they'll leave behind? So that's question one. Question two is around like legislation. And when I worked at Red Cross, they did the Uber clothing drive, and they thought they would get 6,000 kgs of clothing, and they got 56,000 kgs of clothing in a weekend. And if you went to the Dominion Road shop, the volunteers were just so overwhelmed. And what I found really interesting is that nowhere on the charity balance sheets is there a line item for how much they spend sending things to landfill. And so I would love to know if there's like legislative opportunities where we don't want to discourage people from sending textiles to op shops, but then there's this little bit of a pat on the back, like I did really well, like I cleared out my wardrobe this weekend and now I'm going to go shopping and get some new stuff. So I guess that's my second question.
Some comments on measurement, because I think you can measure anything. Better or worse, like the types of measurements. And what we've always struggled with in measuring stuff is not the measurement, but the reference value, which is a bit of a sciencey term. But, what do you measure? What are you comparing that measurement against? And this is a big problem in social return on investment. So, I measure the improvement in mental health from a talking therapy session. And, I can say, that improved at 10%. There's a quality of life adjusted years value I can attribute to that. I can put a number to it. But we're not comparing that to anything. Like, what is the actual gold standard for an increase in that? Is it 10%? Is it 40? I have no idea. And we really struggle with this in sustainability a lot. It's like there's so many different types of reference values. You can have a benchmark. Often it's set really low. You could have a comparative benchmark, the industry average. You could have an absolute target, so many, micrograms of nitrates per hectare or something. You can have the ratios, the intervals. There's so many, and it's always the forgotten part. So measuring stuff's great when you're measuring it in comparison to something else, so you can see if you're doing well or you're progressing, or at the very least you're doing it over time. Yeah, the bit about measuring is not going to leave the world a better place for your kids. What I see that motivates people to leave the world a better place, the strongest thing I see is a collective mindset or a community mindset. And the reason why so many, say, Māori farms outperform on sustainability is because they're responsible to a much bigger community around them. They're not responsible to just their shareholders or just the family. They're responsible to this, even if it's a small family farm, there's still the layers of cousins and whānau around it that they're responsible for. So, that's the only path I've seen is broadening away from an individualistic view of just my family unit to a broader view. And how do you transition a Western individualistic society to that? And
Well, that was going to be my question.
No idea.
I'm not going to answer it all, but I was just reflecting as you were speaking, Jay, and with your question, Kirsten, about student grades. And we run a course that's about community engagement, and you have to show up to give your presentation back to the community at the end. And you have to show up for all your classmates' presentations as part of that. And I put that expectation out very clearly. My colleague April and myself spent a lot of time communicating that throughout the whole semester. And then the last thing, a student didn't come. They came to their presentation, but they didn't come to the rest. And then I got this panicked email. How many marks will I lose because I didn't come to my classmate's presentation? And I said, none, but I'm really disappointed in you. And he's like, but how many do I lose? And he couldn't, it was so strange. I was like, I'm not gonna actually take marks off for that because you did give your presentation, but it was like that, the learning outcome was showing up, and I'm disappointed that you didn't get that. And it was almost like that hurt more in a sense, but he also couldn't quite understand it. He couldn't quite, because he's like, well, if you care, then why didn't you take marks off? And then I was like, well, measurement isn't the point. The point is that you become an ethical person that shows up, and you didn't. And that's kind of on you, you know. Yeah, so I do think it's ingrained. So, and we do that to our children through these kinds of education systems that rank and measure. You know, and we do that to our students. And we've all been taught, if we've been taught to teach, which not all academics have, is that, you know, if you want them to do something, you have to attach grades to it. But what have we done by doing that? We've reduced, you know, quite a lot of student political activism that you would see in the 90s, where you kind of had one exam at the end of the class, was enabled because you weren't spending all this time trying to meet the grade requirements of all the different assignments that you had. So, yeah, I mean, kind of from my industry, thinking about some of the downside of measurement is how do you hold both of those together? Like, I want you to be an ethical person, but I can't really put a number on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we talk about, when we're talking about sustainability, or we talk about aspects of circularity, you know, embedding that right at the heart of the enterprise is so crucial. But when we talk about responsibility as an individual, I feel like sometimes what are we doing in terms of encouraging a person to be responsible for their consumption, and how can we actually work towards encouraging more of that, you know, I think is really important. The second aspect of your
Oh, sorry, I was so greedy. I was like, I've got the mic, I'm going to give it the mic.
I was actually wondering whether Bernadette could answer it, but I think she's slipped outside, so maybe we'll come back to that. Are there any other comments or questions that... Yep.
I have one on that concept of reference values. It's a comment, maybe a question, but on that concept of reference values and the subjectivity of it, and how you... it's almost, you reference quantum mechanics, and if anyone's ever read a book called The Dancing Woolly Masters, it's a lovely introduction to quantum mechanics and how the very act of observing something is subjective and changes the value of that thing. And so how we choose to measure and value things is reflective of our society, and is reflective of our culture and what we as this community value. So it's really hard to sort of start to disentangle the subjective measurements and reference values from what society asks for. And so trying to, so I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's really hard to change the system.
I think that's worthy of a comment. Do any of you want to comment on that?
Someone else was going to comment on
okay.
Yeah, get a few.
Oh, it was kind of related, but slightly different. So please, yeah.
No, that gives us time to think.
I was just thinking about sort of different knowledge types and measuring, and sometimes, although measurement, it could be a useful way of communicating, I wonder sometimes whether it creates a distance, and thinking a lot of the things that we've been talking about today are very material, they have very material lives, and I was thinking about this messiness, and like when you know that the milk is off, you have a very visceral reaction. And I was thinking about tamariki and younger generations, and actually, how are there ways that we can also have experiences where we bring, for example, young people to the tips, so that you actually see the consequences of our actions or inactions, so it's not so clean. Because I think sometimes when things are measured, it feels very clean and objectified and kind of discrete. And if you understand how to read those measurements, you understand the impact. But sometimes different communication methods might allow the impact or those measurements to be felt.
I love that. I just went on a tip tour, Palmerston North. Highly recommend. You know, and they do take children. But it was what I really came away from it was the workers' job of sorting the recycling, and that's really visceral when you haven't cleaned it properly, or you've, you know, like watching them work was, you know, they become real. When I'm putting something in the recycling bin, that's the person that has to deal with me when I haven't done it correctly. So that was, yeah, I love that idea. I had a student who did she was developing climate indicators through visceral feel in Vietnam, and she interviewed farmers who could splash the water, and the way that the light reflected off it, they could tell how saline it was and whether to close the sluice gate to the rice fields, and they could feel the soil and sort of tell from the texture of the soil what was missing. You know, and she kind of talked about those as climate change indicators, because over time their visceral kind of response to those things was changing and their observations were changing. So yeah, I love that idea. And I've forgotten what your question was that I asked for more time on, so I'll pass that on, but we're almost done.
I think you're all avoiding that wonderful comment that... Is it Tammy?
Tammy, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't.
I think I agree with you, yeah.
I think it was a very, very deep comment that we're going to have to reflect on. Any final comments or questions? Because we are almost ready to wrap up. No? Well, I think on that note, we'll sort of wrap things up. Say thank you to our panel. And thank you all for the questions in this session. That was fantastic discussion. So on behalf of our project team, I'd like to say thank you all for making the time today. I think we've had 1 year of this where we got funded, and we've been working with industry to sort of create these connections and get to the point where we are today. So, you know, it seems like it's a one-day effort, but actually we've been working behind the scenes for a long time. So we'd like to thank you all and all our industry partners and the relationships we've built with you for all the work that you've also put into actually being here today. It's made our day a lot more fruitful, and let's hope that there are many ideas that we can sort of take forward and work with different people on in the room. So thank you all. I'd like to invite Sita up to sort of... Angela's going to close for us? Okay.
Kia ora. Just before I do the closing karakia, I was thinking of a whakatauki to share, just on our sort of closing comments there. E hara taku toa I te tō takatahi, engari he tō takitini. It's not my strength alone, but the strength of many, which I thought sort of captured what we're all saying. So here, karakia whakamutunga. Kia tau te manakitanga ki runga I tēnā o tātou, kia piki te ora, kia piki te māramatanga, kia hoki pai atu, kia hoki pai mai. Tūturu whakamaua kia tēnā, haumie, huie, tāki e.
Thank you so much, Angela. And on that that note, go safe, everyone. Have a lovely evening.